Explore Poirot's Casebook Audio, where Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot cracks cases in immersive audio stories. In the shadowed halls of Marwood Manor, a scream pierces the night. Lady Ashford lies dead, stabbed in a locked room, the key inside. Who betrayed her trust? Was it the glamorous widow, the nervous doctor, the brash barrister, the timid niece, the war-scarred major, or the secretive financier? A single pearl earring, a smudge of wax, a burned word, trust whisper of a cunning killer. Hercule Poirot, with his little gray cells, unravels a web of lies, but can he solve the impossible before the truth slips away? Dive into Closed Casket, boxed Bloodshed, where every clue hides a secret and every secret hides a murderer. Chapter 1. The Gathering at Marwood Manor. The late autumn sun cast a golden haze over Marwood Manor, a sprawling estate nestled in the heart of the Sussex Downs. Its ivy-clad walls and towering chimneys loomed with an air of faded grandeur, as though the house itself held secrets it was reluctant to share. The year was 1938, and the world beyond the manor's wrought iron gates was restless with whispers of war. But within, a different kind of tension simmered. Lady Beatrice Ashford, the widowed mistress of Marwood, had summoned an eclectic assembly of guests for what she described as a weekend of reconciliation. The invitation, penned in her elegant hand, promised fine dining, spirited conversation, and the settling of old scores. Yet as the guests arrived, the air was thick with unease, as though each carried a private burden too heavy to conceal. Captain Arthur Hastings, Hercule Poirot's steadfast friend and occasional chronicler, stepped from the chauffeur-driven Rolls-Royce, his eyes scanning the manor's facade. He adjusted his hat, feeling the chill of November seep through his overcoat. Hastings had not expected an invitation to Marwood, nor had he anticipated the cryptic note from Poirot insisting he attend. Mon ami, Poirot had written, your presence is essential. There is a matter at Marwood that requires our attention. I shall join you anon. Hastings, ever loyal, had complied, though he wondered what could draw the meticulous Belgian detective to such a gathering. The gravel crunched underfoot as Hastings approached the entrance, where a butler with a face like polished marble greeted him. Captain Hastings? Lady Ashford awaits in the drawing-room. The butler's tone was clipped, his eyes darting briefly to the other arriving guests, a motley collection of figures, each as distinct as the next. There was Dr. Rupert Langley, a gaunt physician with a nervous habit of adjusting his spectacles. Mrs. Evelyn Carver, a glamorous widow whose emerald earrings caught the light. Mr. Julian Travers, a brash young barrister with a penchant for loud waistcoats. Miss Clara Henshaw, Lady Ashford's timid niece clutching a prayer book, and Major Ernest Blake, a retired military man whose limp suggested an old war wound. Lastly, there was Mr. Victor Grayson, a dour financier whose briefcase seemed an extension of his person. Each guest, Hastings noted, carried an air of guarded anticipation, as though they knew the weekend held more than polite conversation. The drawing-room was a study in opulence, crystal chandeliers, velvet drapes, and a roaring fire that did little to warm the chill of suspicion. Lady Ashford, a statuesque woman in her 60s, greeted her guests with a smile that did not reach her eyes. Her silver hair was swept into an elegant chignon, and her black silk gown whispered of mourning, though her husband had died a decade prior. "Welcome all," she said, her voice clear and commanding. Marwood has long been a place of secrets, but tonight we shall lay them bare. I have invited you here to resolve a matter of great import, a legacy that has divided us for too long." Hastings frowned, sensing the undercurrent of her words. The legacy was no secret to those present. The Ashford estate, worth a fortune in land and investments, was the subject of bitter disputes among family and associates. Lady Ashford's late husband, Lord Reginald, had left a will that favored some and excluded others, sowing discord that had festered for years. Tonight, it seemed, she intended to address it. Dinner was a lavish affair, though the atmosphere was strained. The long mahogany table gleamed under candlelight, and the clink of silverware punctuated awkward silences. Dr. Langley spoke of medical advancements, his voice trembling slightly. Mrs. Carver deflected questions about her late husband's fortune with a dazzling smile, and Major Blake recounted war stories with a bitterness that suggested personal grievances. Clara Henshaw barely spoke, her eyes fixed on her plate, while Travers and Grayson exchanged barbed remarks about financial dealings. Hastings, seated near Lady Ashford, observed it all, his mind drifting to Poirot's absence. Where was the little detective, and why had he insisted on this gathering? As dessert was served, a delicate lemon soufflé, the conversation turned to the legacy. Lady Ashford rose, her presence commanding silence. "My friends," she began, "you all know why you are here. My husband's will was a source of pain, but I have decided to amend its terms. Tomorrow I shall reveal my new intentions, which will affect each of you. I urge you to reflect tonight, for not all will be pleased." A murmur rippled through the room. Grayson's knuckles whitened around his wine glass, Travers's smile faltered, and Clara's eyes widened in alarm. Hastings felt a prickle of unease. The air was heavy with motives, greed, envy, resentment. He glanced at the grandfather clock. 9:47 p.m. The evening was far from over. After dinner, the guests retired to their rooms, save for Hastings, who lingered in the library, drawn to its shelves of leather-bound volumes. The fire crackled, casting shadows on the walls. He was leafing through a volume of Dickens when a scream shattered the silence. Woman's cry, sharp and desperate from the upper floor. Hastings dropped the book and raced upstairs, joined by the other guests, their faces pale in the dim light of the corridor. The scream had come from Lady Ashford's bedroom. The door was locked, the key still in the keyhole from the inside. Major Blake, with surprising strength, broke the door open. Inside, Lady Ashford lay on the floor, her silk gown stained crimson. A letter opener, its handle ornate with silver filigree, protruded from her chest. Her eyes stared blankly at the ceiling, and a single drop of blood traced a path down her cheek. The window was shut, the curtains undisturbed. The clock on the mantel read 10:15 p.m. Dr. Langley knelt beside her, his hands shaking as he checked for a pulse. "She's dead," he whispered, "stabbed through the heart." Hastings' mind raced. A locked room, a murder, and a house full of suspects. He thought of Poirot, wishing the detective were here. As if summoned by the thought, a familiar voice cut through the chaos. "Mon Dieu, what a tragedy! But fear not, mes amis, Hercule Poirot is here to unravel this puzzle." Hastings turned to see the diminutive figure of Poirot in the doorway, his mustache immaculate, his eyes gleaming with purpose. How he had arrived so swiftly Hastings could not fathom, but relief flooded him. The little gray cells were now on the case. The guests stared at Poirot, some with suspicion, others with hope. He surveyed the scene, his gaze lingering on the letter opener, the locked door, and the expressions of those around him. A locked room, a lady dead, and a house full of secrets, he murmured. This, mes amis, is a crime most intriguing. We shall begin at once. Hastings knew that look in Poirot's eyes. The game was afoot, and no detail would escape the detective's notice. As the guests whispered among themselves, Poirot stepped forward, his voice calm but commanding. "Tell me everything," he said, "and leave nothing out. The truth, it hides in the smallest of things." The night stretched on, heavy with suspicion. Marwood Manor, once a place of elegance, was now a stage for murder. And Hercule Poirot, with his methodical mind, would not rest until the killer was unmasked. Chapter 2. The Crime at Marwood Manor. The air in Lady Ashford's bedroom was thick with the metallic tang of blood and the weight of unspoken fears. The guests crowded near the doorway, their faces a tableau of shock, suspicion, and carefully veiled guilt. Hercule Poirot stood at the center of the room, his small frame radiating authority. His eyes, sharp as a hawk's, moved methodically over the scene, the body of Lady Beatrice Ashford, the letter opener embedded in her chest, the locked door, the undisturbed window. Captain Hastings at his side felt the familiar stir of anticipation. Poirot's little gray cells were already at work, piecing together a puzzle that to the untrained eye seemed impenetrable. "Mon ami," Poirot said softly to Hastings, "observe the precision of this crime. A single thrust, direct to the heart. No hesitation, no struggle. This is not the act of an amateur." He knelt beside the body, his gloved fingers hovering over the letter opener without touching it. "And the door, locked from the inside. Most curious, n'est-ce pas?" Hastings nodded, his mind racing to keep up. But how could the killer escape? The key was still in the lock, and the window is bolted. Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of amusement or irritation. Hastings could never be sure. The how, mon cher Hastings, is secondary. First, we must understand the why. Motive, always motive. And in this house, I suspect motives abound. The guests, still huddled near the door, were shepherded downstairs by the butler, Mr. Reynolds, whose composure had cracked only slightly. Poirot instructed that no one leave the manor and that the local police be summoned. Dr. Langley, pale and shaken, lingered a moment longer, muttering about the futility of medical intervention. "She was dead before I reached her," he said, almost to himself. The wound was too precise. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Précis, you say, doctor? You have experience with such wounds?" Langley flushed, adjusting his spectacles. "Only in my practice, Mr. Poirot. I've seen stab wounds before in accidents or worse." "Bien," Poirot said, waving him away. "We shall speak later." As the room emptied, Poirot began his examination in earnest. Hastings watched, marveling at the detective's meticulousness. Poirot noted the position of Lady Ashford's body. Sprawled near the fireplace, one arm outstretched as if reaching for something. The letter opener, ornate with a silver handle engraved with the Ashford crest, was buried to its hilt. A small pool of blood had formed beneath her, staining the Persian rug. The mantel clock, still ticking, read 10:17 p.m., a mere 2 minutes after the scream had been heard. Poirot moved to the door, inspecting the key and lock. "The key is indeed in place," he murmured. "No signs of tampering. The lock is old but functional. And the window—" He crossed to the tall sash window. its heavy curtains drawn. The bolt was secure and the frame showed no signs of being forced. "No exit here," he concluded. Hastings frowned. "Then how did the murderer leave? Unless—" he hesitated, reluctant to voice the impossible. "Unless one of the guests is not what they seem." Poirot finished, his tone dry. "Or perhaps the crime is not as it appears. Patience, Hastings. The truth reveals itself in layers." Poirot's attention turned to the room itself. Lady Ashford's bedroom was a study in elegance, a four-poster bed with silk hangings, a mahogany dressing table cluttered with perfumes and jewelry, a wardrobe filled with gowns. On the dressing table, a single pearl earring lay abandoned, its partner missing. Poirot picked it up, turning it in the light. "Curious," he said. "One earring but no pair. Did Our Lady lose it in a struggle, or was it taken?" Hastings peered at the table. "There's a smudge here," he said, pointing to a faint mark on the polished surface. "Lipstick, perhaps?" Poirot leaned closer, his nose almost touching the wood. "Not lipstick, mon ami. Wax. Candle wax, to be precise. And yet—" He glanced at the candelabra on the table, its candles unlit. "These have not been used tonight. Where, then, does this wax come from?" Before Hastings could respond, a heavy knock announced the arrival of Inspector Morris, a stout man with a bristling mustache and an air of impatience. "Mr. Poirot," he said gruffly, "I've been told you're meddling in my jurisdiction. This is a straightforward case. Locked room, murder weapon in plain sight. One of these guests is our killer, and I'll have them in cuffs by morning." Poirot's smile was polite but razor-sharp. "Straightforward, Inspector? I think not. A locked room is never so simple, but come. Let us gather the facts. The time of death, you agree, is approximately 10:15 p.m. Morris nodded, consulting his notebook. "The scream was heard at 10:15 according to the butler. The doctor confirmed death shortly after. No one could have left the room without being seen." "Précisément," Poirot said. "And so we begin with the alibis. Let us assemble the guests in the drawing room." The drawing room, still warm from the earlier fire, was now a stage for interrogation. The guests sat in a tense semicircle, their faces illuminated by the flickering chandelier. Poirot stood before them, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes moving from one to another like a conductor assessing an orchestra. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "Lady Ashford was murdered tonight, stabbed in her locked bedroom. Each of you was in this house at the time of the crime, and each of you, I suspect, has something to hide. Let us establish where you were at 10:15 p.m. Mrs. Evelyn Carver spoke first, her voice smooth as velvet. "I was in my room freshening up after dinner. I heard the scream and came running. Her emerald earrings glinted, and Hastings noted their similarity to the pearl earring on Lady Ashford's table." Dr. Langley cleared his throat. "I was in the library reviewing some medical journals. I heard the scream and followed Captain Hastings upstairs." Mr. Julian Travers leaned forward, his waistcoat a garish splash of color. "I was in the billiard room practicing my shots. Alone, I'm afraid. I heard the commotion and joined the others." Miss Clara Henshaw clutched her prayer book, her voice barely audible. "I was in my room praying. I didn't want to come down after dinner. Aunt Beatrice's talk of the legacy frightened me." Major Blake's jaw tightened. "I was on the terrace, smoking a cigar. The scream brought me inside. Mr. Victor Grayson, his briefcase at his feet, spoke last. I was in my room going over some papers. I heard the scream and came at once. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Most interesting. All of you alone at the precise moment of the crime. Convenient, non? But let us not rush to conclusions. Inspector, have you examined the letter opener? Morris nodded. It's Lady Ashford's, kept on her writing desk. Anyone could have taken it. Anyone, Poirot echoed, but not everyone. The killer needed opportunity, motive, and nerve. We shall discover who possesses all three. As the questioning continued, Hastings watched the guests. Mrs. Carver's smile was too perfect. Langley's hands trembled. Travers' bravado seemed forced. Clara's timidity felt almost performative, while Blake and Grayson exchanged glances that suggested a shared history. The room was a web of secrets, and Poirot was already tugging at its threads. The inspector, impatient, pressed for a suspect. It's got to be one of them, he muttered to Hastings. The niece, maybe. She stands to inherit the most. Poirot overheard and shook his head. The obvious, Inspector, is rarely the truth. Miss Henshaw's fear may be genuine, or it may be a mask. We must look deeper. As the clock struck midnight, Poirot dismissed the guests, instructing them to remain in their rooms. To Hastings he said, "This crime, mon ami, is like a locked casket. The key is not in the lock, but in the minds of those who surround it. Tomorrow we shall uncover more." Hastings nodded, his mind swirling with questions. The wax, the earring, the locked door, each was a piece of the puzzle. But as he followed Poirot to their rooms, he couldn't shake the feeling that the manor itself was watching, its walls guarding the truth as fiercely as the guests guarded their secrets. Chapter 3. The Arrival of Hercule Poirot. The morning after Lady Ashford's murder dawned gray and heavy, the Sussex Downs shrouded in mist that clung to Marwood Manor like a mourner's veil. Inside, the atmosphere was no less oppressive. The guests, confined to the manor by Inspector Morris's orders, moved through the halls with the wariness of caged animals, their eyes darting to one another, searching for the betrayer among them. Captain Arthur Hastings, bleary-eyed from a restless night, stood at the window of the morning room, watching the fog swirl over the manicured lawns. His thoughts were interrupted by the familiar tap of polished shoes on the parquet floor. "Bon matin, mon ami," said Hercule Poirot, his voice crisp despite the hour. He was immaculate as ever, his black patent leather shoes gleaming, his mustache perfectly symmetrical. In his hand he held a small notebook, its pages already filled with precise slanting script. "You look troubled, Hastings. The weight of this crime, it sits heavily upon you, oui?" Hastings turned, managing a wry smile. "I don't know how you stay so calm, Poirot. A woman is dead, the killer is among us, in that locked room. It's impossible." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Impossible? Non, non, Hastings. The impossible is merely a challenge to the little gray cells. The locked room is a trick, a sleight of hand. We shall uncover it, but first we must understand the players in this drama." Hastings frowned. "You arrived so quickly last night. How did you know to come to Marwood?" Poirot's expression grew enigmatic. "A letter, mon ami. An anonymous letter sent to my London flat 2 days ago. It spoke of a gathering at Marwood, of secrets that would lead to violence. It begged for my presence, and so I came, though I arrived too late to prevent the tragedy." "Anonymous?" Hastings' brow furrowed. "Do you think Lady Ashford sent it?" "Perhaps. Poirot said, stroking his mustache. Or perhaps another who knew what was brewing here. But come, let us join the others. The game is afoot, and we must observe. The guests were assembled in the dining room where a somber breakfast was laid out. Silver urns of coffee, racks of toast, and a platter of untouched kedgeree. Inspector Morris stood at the head of the table, his notebook open, his face set in a scowl. The guests sat in silence, their appetites diminished by the events of the previous night. Mrs. Evelyn Carver sipped her coffee with studied elegance, though her hand trembled slightly. Dr. Rupert Langley pushed his spectacles up his nose, his eyes darting nervously. Julian Travers, his loud waistcoat replaced by a more subdued jacket, drummed his fingers on the table. Clara Henshaw clutched her prayer book, her lips moving silently. Major Ernest Blake sat stiffly, his cane propped against his chair, while Victor Grayson's briefcase rested at his feet like a loyal dog. Poirot entered with a bow, his presence commanding attention. Mesdames et messieurs, he said, I regret that our gathering is under such tragic circumstances. But rest assured, Hercule Poirot will bring clarity to this darkness. I have a few questions if you will indulge me. Inspector Morris bristled. I'm handling the questioning, Mr. Poirot. This is a police matter. Poirot's smile was disarming. Of course, Inspector, but my methods, they complement yours. I seek the truth through the mind, not merely the evidence. May I proceed? Morris grunted, waving a hand. Go on, then, but don't interfere. Poirot turned to the guests, his gaze sweeping over them. Let us begin with the letter opener. It was Lady Ashford's, kept on her writing desk. Who among you saw it last? Clara Henshaw's voice was barely a whisper. I saw it yesterday afternoon. Aunt Beatrice was writing letters in her study. The opener was there on the desk. And you, mademoiselle, were close to your aunt? Poirot asked gently. Clara's eyes filled with tears. She was kind to me, but distant. She spoke of the legacy, said it would change everything. I didn't understand. Poirot nodded, turning to Mrs. Carver. Madam, you are a friend of Lady Ashford, no? Did you ever see her with this letter opener? Mrs. Carver's smile was tight. Beatrice was always writing letters. The opener was a favorite of hers, silver with the Ashford crest. I saw it often, but not yesterday. Poirot's eyes lingered on her earrings, which matched the pearl found in the bedroom. And your earrings, madame, they are most striking. Did you wear them yesterday evening? Her hand fluttered to her ear. Why, yes, they're a favorite pair. Surely that's irrelevant. Perhaps, Poirot said smoothly, but everything it matters. He moved on to Dr. Langley, whose nervousness was palpable. Doctor, you examined the body. You said the wound was precise. Have you seen such a wound before in your professional capacity? Langley swallowed hard. As I told you, Mr. Poirot, I've seen stab wounds in my work. This was unusually clean, a single thrust, no defensive marks. It suggests skill or luck. Luck, Poirot murmured, has no place in murder. And you, Major Blake, a man of military precision. Have you handled such a weapon? Blake's jaw tightened. I've seen my share of violence, sir. But I'm no murderer. I was on the terrace, as I said. Poirot nodded, his gaze shifting to Travers and Grayson, who had been uncharacteristically quiet. Mr. Travers, Mr. Grayson, you both have ties to Lady Ashford's finances, non? The legacy, it was a matter of contention? Travers smirked, though his eyes were wary. Beatrice was tight-fisted with her fortune. She dangled it over us like a carrot. But I didn't need her money. Grayson's voice was cold. Nor I. My dealings with Lady Ashford were professional. She trusted me to manage her investments. Poirot's smile was inscrutable. And yet here you all are, drawn to Marwood by the promise of her decision. A decision she did not live to reveal. The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling over the guests. Inspector Morris, growing impatient, interjected. Enough of this. I've searched the rooms and found nothing conclusive. The letter opener's fingerprints are smudged, useless. We need alibis, hard evidence. Poirot raised a hand. Patience, Inspector. The evidence, it is here in the minds and hearts of those present. Let us consider the timeline. The scream was heard at 10:15 p.m. The clock in the bedroom read 10:17 when we entered. The door was locked, the key inside. No one was seen leaving the room, yet someone entered, killed, and vanished. How? Hastings, unable to resist, ventured a theory. Could it be suicide, Poirot? The locked door, the key inside. Poirot shook his head. No, Hastings. Lady Ashford was a woman of resolve. She spoke of amending her will, of confronting her. Guests, such a woman does not end her life with a letter opener. No, this is murder, and the method is clever. Poirot excused himself to examine the bedroom again with Hastings in tow. The room was as they had left it, the blood now dried on the rug. Poirot's eyes returned to the dressing table where the single pearl earring lay. This earring, he said, it bothers me. Why one, and not the pair? And the wax? He pointed to the smudge Hastings had noticed. It is not from the candelabra. See, the candles are pristine. He moved to the fireplace where a few embers still glowed. The fire was burning last night, yet the room was cold. Why? He knelt, sifting through the ashes with a poker. His fingers paused, extracting a small blackened object. A fragment of paper, charred but legible. It bore a single word, trust. Mon Dieu, Poirot whispered. A clue, Hastings. A word burned perhaps in haste. Trust, or the lack of it, is at the heart of this crime. As they returned to the dining room, Poirot's mind was clearly racing. The guests, still seated, watched him warily. He addressed them once more. Mes amis, this murder is not a crime of passion, but of calculation. Someone in this room knew Lady Ashford's plans and acted to stop them. I urge you to speak now, before the truth is forced from you. No one spoke. The silence was deafening, broken only by the distant chime of the grandfather clock. 10 a.m. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Very well, he said. The game continues. But know this. Hercule Poirot sees all, and the truth it cannot hide forever. Hastings felt a chill. The manor, with its locked doors and hidden motives, was a labyrinth. But with Poirot leading the way, the path to the truth was beginning to emerge. Chapter 4. The questions begin. The morning mist had burned away, leaving Marwood Manor bathed in pale sunlight that did little to dispel the gloom within. The dining room where the guests had lingered after Poirot's initial questioning was now a stage for deeper scrutiny. Hercule Poirot, his small frame erect and his eyes alight with purpose, paced before the assembled company, his polished shoes clicking softly on the polished floor. Captain Hastings, seated near the window, watched his friend with a mixture of awe and impatience. Poirot's method, methodical, relentless, psychological, was unlike anything Inspector Morris, glowering at the head of the table, could muster. The inspector's notebook was open, his pencil tapping irritably, but it was clear that Poirot held the room's attention. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice calm but piercing, we are gathered to unravel the mystery of Lady Ashford's death. A locked room, a single stab wound, a letter opener as the weapon. The facts, they are simple, yet the truth is complex. To find it, we must probe the hearts and minds of those present. Let us begin with the alibis, and this time Mies. Ami, I ask for precision. He turned first to Mrs. Evelyn Carver, whose elegance seemed undimmed by the morning's tension. Her emerald earrings caught the light, and Hastings recalled the single pearl on Lady Ashford's dressing table. Madame Carver, Poirot said, you were in your room at 10:15 p.m., freshening up, oui? Tell me, what did you do before the scream? Mrs. Carver's smile was composed, though her fingers toyed with her coffee spoon. I was tired after dinner. Beatrice's talk of the legacy was unsettling. I went to my room around 9:30, changed into my dressing gown, and was brushing my hair when I heard the scream. I rushed out, joining the others in the corridor. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And your room, it is on the same floor as Lady Ashford's? Yes, she replied, and 2 doors down. Most convenient, Poirot murmured. And you saw no one in the corridor before the scream? No one, she said firmly, though her eyes flicked briefly to Major Blake. Poirot turned to the Major, whose weathered face was set in a scowl. Major Blake, you were on the terrace smoking a cigar. A solitary pursuit, no? Did you see or hear anything unusual before 10:15? Blake's hand rested on his cane, his knuckles white. It was quiet. I was thinking about Beatrice's words, her damned legacy. I heard the scream, dropped my cigar, and came inside. That's all. Poirot nodded, his gaze lingering on the Major's cane. You're limp, Major. It is from an old injury? Boer War, Blake said curtly. Shrapnel in the knee. Slows me down, but I manage. Indeed, Poirot said, his tone unreadable. He moved to Doctor. Rupert Langley, whose nervous habit of adjusting his spectacles had grown more pronounced. Doctor, you were in the library reading journals. A curious choice for a social evening. What drew you there? Langley's voice was strained. I needed quiet. Beatrice's announcement about the will, it upset me. I've been her physician for years, and she trusted me with certain matters. I wanted to think. Certain matters? Poirot's eyebrow arched. Medical or personal? Langley hesitated. Medical mostly. She had a heart condition, mild but chronic. I prescribed digitalis, but she was in good health otherwise. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Digitalis, you say? A drug that, in the wrong hands, can be most dangerous. Was Lady Ashford taking it regularly? Yes, Langley said, but I checked her medication last week. Everything was in order. Bon, Poirot said, though his tone suggested he was far from satisfied. He turned to Julian Travers, whose youthful bravado seemed tempered by the morning's gravity. Mr. Travers, you were in the billiard room alone. A man of your energy, not joining the others after dinner. Travers shrugged, his smile forced. I like a game to clear my head. Beatrice's talk of changing the will, it was a shock. I needed space. And you heard nothing until the scream? Poirot pressed. Nothing, Travers said. The billiard room's at the back of the house, thick walls. Poirot nodded, then turned to Clara Henshaw, whose pale face and trembling hands betrayed her fear. Mademoiselle Henshaw, you were praying in your room. A devout young lady, no? Did you speak to your aunt after dinner? Clara's voice was barely audible. "No, Monsieur Poirot. I was frightened. Aunt Beatrice said the new will would surprise us all. I didn't want to know." Poirot's expression softened, but his eyes were sharp. "And yet, as her niece, you stand to gain much from her estate, oui?" Clara's eyes widened. "I don't care about the money. I loved her." "Love," Poirot said softly, "can be a motive as powerful as greed." He turned finally to Victor Grayson, whose dour expression had not wavered. "Mr. Grayson, you were reviewing papers in your room. Financial papers, I presume, given your role as Lady Ashford's advisor." Grayson nodded, his voice clipped. "Yes. Beatrice asked me to prepare a summary of her investments. I was working when I heard the scream." "And these papers," Poirot said, "they concern the legacy?" "Some did," Grayson admitted. "She was planning significant changes." Poirot clasped his hands behind his back, pacing slowly. "Each of you alone at the moment of the crime, each with a reason to fear or desire Lady Ashford's decision. And yet, the door was locked, the key inside. A puzzle, non?" Inspector Morris, growing restless, interjected. "We've checked the alibis, Mr. Poirot. No one saw anyone near Lady Ashford's room. The butler, Reynolds, was in the kitchen with the staff. The servants' quarters are too far to hear anything. It's one of these 6. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Perhaps, Inspector. But let us consider the physical evidence. The letter opener, the wax, the pearl earring, the burned paper with the word trust. These are not mere objects. They are signposts to the truth." Hastings, unable to contain himself, spoke up. "The wax, Poirot. What do you make of it? You said the candles in the room weren't used." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Exactement, Hastings. The wax is a clue most vital. It suggests a candle was used, but not one from the candelabra. Perhaps a smaller candle carried by the killer extinguished in haste. And the earring..." He turned to Mrs. Carver. "Madame, you are certain you wore both earrings last night?" Her hand touched her ear, her composure faltering. I believe so. I didn't notice one missing." "Curious," Poirot said. "And the burned paper found in the fireplace. Trust. A word that points to betrayal, perhaps?" The guests exchanged uneasy glances. Major Blake's cane tapped the floor, a sharp sound in the silence. Dr. Langley's spectacles slipped again, and he pushed them up with a trembling hand. Clara's lips moved in silent prayer while Travers and Grayson avoided each other's eyes. Poirot continued his pacing. "Let us reconstruct the evening. At 9:47 p.m., Lady Ashford speaks of her new will, unsettling you all. By 10:15, she is dead, stabbed in a locked room. The scream is heard, and within minutes you are all in the corridor, yet no one saw the killer. How is this possible?" Morris snorted. "A secret passage, maybe. These old houses are full of them." Poirot shook his head. "I have examined the room, Inspector. The walls are solid, the floor intact. No passages, no tricks of architecture. The answer lies in the people, not the place." He paused, his gaze settling on each guest in turn. "I ask you now to search your memories. Did you see anything, a shadow, a sound, a gesture that seemed out of place? The smallest detail may unlock this mystery." No one spoke, but the tension was palpable. Mrs. Carver's spoon clinked against her cup. Blake's cane tapped again. Langley's breathing was audible, a faint wheeze. Poirot's eyes missed nothing. As the questioning ended, Poirot drew Hastings aside. "Mon ami, this case is like a tapestry woven with threads of deceit. The wax, the earring, the word trust. They are stitches that do not fit. We must pull them gently lest the whole unravel too soon." Hastings nodded, though his mind was a whirl of confusion. "Do you suspect someone already, Poirot?" Poirot's smile was cryptic. "I suspect everyone, Hastings, until the little gray cells tell me otherwise. Come, let us walk the grounds. The manor may yet whisper its secrets." As they stepped into the chilly air, Hastings felt the weight of the mystery deepen. Marwood Manor, with its locked doors and guarded hearts, was a fortress of lies. But Poirot, with his relentless logic, was already chipping away at its walls. Chapter 5. The Red Herrings. The sun hung low over Marwood Manor, its rays struggling to pierce the lingering mist that cloaked the Sussex Downs. Inside, the atmosphere was stifling, as though the walls themselves absorbed the suspicion that permeated every glance and whisper. Hercule Poirot, ever the picture of composure, stood in the library, his small hands clasped behind his back, his eyes scanning the shelves as if they might reveal the killer's identity. Captain Hastings at his side felt the weight of the investigation pressing upon him. The locked room, the letter opener, the cryptic clues. They formed a puzzle that seemed to mock his every attempt at understanding. But Poirot, with his unerring calm, was undeterred. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice low, "we are surrounded by red herrings designed to distract us from the truth. The obvious suspect, the convenient alibi, these are traps for the unwary mind. We must look beyond them." Hastings frowned, glancing at the door where Inspector Morris's heavy tread could be heard, pacing the corridor. "The inspector seems convinced it's Clara Henshaw. She's the niece, the likely heir. Motive enough, he says." Poirot's mustache twitched with disdain. "The inspector, he sees only the surface. Mademoiselle Henshaw's timidity, her tears, they make her an easy target. But ease is not truth. Come, let us review the evidence and separate the herrings from the facts." The morning had been spent in further interviews, with Inspector Morris taking a heavy-handed approach that yielded little but resentment. The guests, confined to the manor, grew restless, their alibis repeated with increasing defensiveness. Poirot, however, had been quiet, observing, his questions sharp but seemingly innocuous. Now in the library he spread his notebook on a table, its pages filled with meticulous notes. "Let us consider the timeline once more," Poirot said, tapping the page. "At 9:47 p.m., Lady Ashford speaks of her new will. By 10:15 she is dead, the scream alerting the household. The door is locked, the key inside. The window is bolted. The letter opener taken from her desk is the weapon. The pearl earring, the wax, the burned paper with the word trust. These are our clues. But there is more, Hastings. The red herrings. They swim in abundance." Hastings leaned forward. "You mean the alibis? Everyone claims to have been alone." "Précisément," Poirot said. "And yet alibis are not evidence. They are stories, and stories can be crafted. Let us examine the obvious suspect, as the inspector does, Mademoiselle Henshaw. She is young, devout, seemingly fragile. The niece, the heir. The will, it would favor her, non. A motive most apparent." "But you don't believe it's her," Hastings said, catching the glint in Poirot's eye. Poirot shook his head. "Her fear, it is genuine, or a performance most masterful. But consider, the stab wound was precise, the work of a steady hand. Does our timid Clara possess such nerve? And the locked room, how does a frightened girl enter, kill, and leave without trace? No, she is a herring placed to distract us. Hastings nodded, though his mind was still tangled. Then who? Grayson with his financial ties, or Travers with his brashness? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. All are possible, Hastings, but we must look to the details. The wax, for instance. It is not from the candelabra in the bedroom. I have checked the Manor's candles. None match the wax's color, a pale yellow with a faint scent of beeswax. This suggests a candle carried by the killer, perhaps to light their way in the dark. And the earring? Hastings asked. Mrs. Carver's reaction when you mentioned it. She seemed nervous. Oui, Poirot said. The pearl earring is curious. Madame Carver claims she wore both earrings, yet one is found in the bedroom. Did it fall during a struggle? Was it placed there? And why a pearl when she wears emeralds? These are questions we must answer. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock. The butler, Mr. Reynolds, entered, his face ashen. Mr. Poirot, sir, the inspector wishes to speak with you. He's found something in Miss Henshaw's room. Poirot's eyes sharpened. Bon, let us see this discovery. They followed Reynolds to Clara's room, a small, sparsely furnished chamber on the second floor. Inspector Morris stood by the dressing table, holding a small vial labeled Digitalis. His expression was triumphant. Found this hidden in her jewelry box, he said. The doctor mentioned Lady Ashford was on Digitalis. If she was poisoned before the stabbing, it explains the lack of struggle. Clara's our girl. Poirot examined the vial, his gloved fingers turning it carefully. Digitalis, oui. A dangerous drug in excess. But tell me, Inspector, was there poison in Lady Ashford's system? Morris's confidence faltered. The coroner's report isn't back yet, but this is damning evidence. Poirot's smile was polite but cutting. Evidence? Or another herring? Why would Mademoiselle Henshaw hide a vial so carelessly? And the stab wound? Why stab a woman already poisoned? No, this is too convenient. Clara, summoned to the room, gasped at the sight of the vial. That's not mine, she cried, her voice trembling. I've never seen it before. Poirot's gaze softened, but his questions were relentless. Mademoiselle, you said your aunt spoke of the will. Did she mention anyone else? A name? A hint? Clara's eyes filled with tears. She said she couldn't trust anyone, not even me. She was so angry talking about betrayal. I didn't understand. Poirot nodded, dismissing her gently. To Morris, he said, the vial, it is a plant, meant to mislead. The killer is clever, but not clever enough to fool Hercule Poirot. Back in the library, Poirot resumed his analysis. The digitalis is a distraction, Hastings. The stab wound was the cause of death. Dr. Langley confirmed it. But the vial suggests someone wishes to cast suspicion on Clara. Who benefits from her guilt? Hastings rubbed his temples. Grayson, perhaps? He manages the estate. If Clara's out of the picture, he might control more. Or Madame Carver, Poirot mused, whose elegance hides a calculating mind. Or Major Blake, whose military precision matches the wound. Or Travers, whose bravado may conceal desperation. Or Langley, who knows the drug's dangers. Hastings sighed. It could be any of them, or none. Patience, mon ami, Poirot said. The red herrings, they swim to obscure the truth, but we shall net them all. Let us walk the corridor where the crime occurred. The scene, it may speak to us. They retraced their steps to the second-floor corridor, where Lady Ashford's room stood sealed by police tape. Poirot examined the carpet, the walls, the door frames. Near the staircase, he paused, kneeling to inspect a faint mark on the floor, a scuff, barely visible in the shape of a half-moon. "Regardez, Hastings," he said, pointing. "A mark, fresh and deliberate. A shoe, perhaps, or something dragged. It is near the stairs, where Major Blake claims he entered from the terrace." Hastings peered at the mark. "You think Blake lied?" "I think," Poirot said au tenue, "that everyone lies in small ways or large. This mark, it is another thread in our tapestry. We must follow it." As they returned to the library, Poirot's notebook grew fuller, his notes a maze of times, alibis, and observations. Hastings watched him, marveling at the detective's focus. The digitalis vial, the scuff mark, the wax, the earring. Each was a piece of the puzzle, but the picture remained elusive. "Poirot," Hastings ventured, "do you think the killer is still in the manor?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Oh, oui, Hastings. The killer is here, watching, listening. They believe they have outwitted us with their locked room and their herrings. But they do not know Hercule Poirot. The truth, it is like a shadow. It moves, but it cannot hide forever." The day stretched on, the manor a crucible of tension. As Poirot closed his notebook, Hastings felt a spark of hope. The red herrings were many, but Poirot's little gray cells were relentless. The killer, whoever they were, was running out of places to hide. Chapter 6. A clue in detail. The afternoon light filtered through the tall windows of Marwood Manor, casting long shadows across the polished floors. The air was heavy with the scent of old wood and wax polish, but beneath it lingered the unspoken dread that gripped the household. Hercule Poirot, his small frame a study in precision, stood in the corridor outside Lady Ashford's bedroom, his eyes fixed on the half-moon scuff mark he had discovered earlier. Captain Hastings, ever at his side, watched as Poirot's gaze darted from the mark to the staircase, then back again, as if tracing an invisible path. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice low but vibrant with purpose, "this mark, it is a whisper from the crime itself. A detail overlooked by the careless, but to Hercule Poirot it speaks volumes. We must listen." Hastings crouched beside him, peering at the faint crescent etched into the floor. "It's barely noticeable, Poirot. Could it be from a servant's shoe or luggage dragged up the stairs?" Poirot shook his head, his mustache quivering with impatience. "Non, Hastings. This mark is fresh, made on the night of the murder. See how the polish is disturbed, the wood slightly gouged. It is deliberate, perhaps the result of something heavy or sharp. And it is here, near the stairs, where Major Blake claims he entered from the terrace." Hastings frowned. "You think Blake left it? His cane, perhaps?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, rising. "Or perhaps it is another of our red herrings placed to mislead. But come, let us return to the bedroom. There is more to uncover." The sealed door to Lady Ashford's room was opened at Poirot's request, the police tape parting like a curtain on a grim stage. Inspector Morris, trailing behind, muttered about the futility of further searches, but Poirot ignored him, his attention wholly absorbed by the scene. The room was as they had left it. The blood-stained rug, the letter opener now removed for evidence, the single pearl earring on the dressing table, the faint smudge of wax. Poirot moved to the fireplace where the charred fragment of paper bearing the word "trust" had been found. He sifted through the ashes once more, his gloved fingers delicate as a surgeon's. "Nothing more here," he murmured. "But the word trust, it haunts me, Hastings. Was it a message from Lady Ashford?" A warning? Or did the killer burn it to conceal their motive? Hastings, standing by the dressing table, pointed to the wax smudge. This wax, Poirot. It's still bothering you, isn't it? You said it didn't match the candelabra. Exactement, Poirot said, crossing to the table. He leaned close, his nose almost touching the surface. The wax is pale yellow with a faint scent of beeswax. The candelabra candles are white, unscented. This wax came from elsewhere. A candle carried by the killer, perhaps, to light their way in the dark. But why a candle when the room has electric lights? Hastings glanced at the ceiling where a crystal chandelier hung. Maybe the power flickered, or they didn't want to risk being seen turning on a light. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A possibility, mon ami, but consider the candle was extinguished, leaving only this smudge. Where is the candle now? Hidden, discarded, or still in the manor? Their conversation was interrupted by a soft knock. Mr. Reynolds, the butler, stood in the doorway, his face pale but composed. Mr. Poirot, sir, I thought you should know. I found something in the servants' quarters. It was tucked behind a loose panel in the pantry. He held out a small object wrapped in a handkerchief, a half-melted beeswax candle, its wick blackened. Poirot's eyes widened as he took it, turning it carefully in his hands. Mon Dieu, Reynolds, this is most significant. Where exactly was it hidden? Behind a panel near the kitchen stairs, Reynolds said. I noticed the panel was loose when I was checking the stores this morning. It's not a place anyone would look unless they knew it was there. Poirot examined the candle, noting its pale yellow hue and faint scent. This matches our wax, Hastings, a clue most vital, but why hide a candle? And who had access to the pantry? Reynolds hesitated. All the guests could have passed through the kitchen, sir. It's not locked, though the staff were there until about 9:30 last night preparing for breakfast. Poirot nodded, dismissing the butler with thanks. To Hastings he said, The candle, it is a piece of the puzzle. The killer used it perhaps to move silently through the manor, avoiding the electric lights, but they hid it in haste, suggesting they feared discovery. Hastings' mind raced. The pantry's near the back stairs, which lead to the second floor. Someone could have slipped up that way without being seen. Oui, Poirot said, and the scuff mark near the main stairs, perhaps it marks their return. But we must be cautious. The candle, like the digitalis vial, could be another herring. We must verify its significance. They returned to the library, where Poirot added the candle to his growing list of clues. He opened his notebook, sketching a rough map of the manor's second floor, marking Lady Ashford's room, the main staircase, the back stairs, and the scuff mark. The killer's path, he said, is becoming clearer. They entered the bedroom, stabbed Lady Ashford, and left, locking the door behind them. But how? The key was inside, the window bolted. Hastings ventured a theory. Could they have used a duplicate key or tampered with the lock? Poirot shook his head. The lock is old but intact, and the key fits perfectly. A duplicate is possible, but unlikely. Lady Ashford was meticulous about her possessions. No, the answer lies in the method, not the mechanics. Their discussion was interrupted by a commotion in the hall. Inspector Morris burst in, followed by a tearful Clara Henshaw. Mr. Poirot, Morris said, his voice triumphant, we've got something else. A letter found in Miss Henshaw's prayer book. It's from Lady Ashford, and it's damning. Clara, her face streaked with tears, clutched the prayer book to her chest. "I didn't know it was there," she cried. "I swear I didn't." Poirot took the letter, a single sheet of cream stationery bearing Lady Ashford's elegant script. He read aloud, "My dear Clara, I fear I cannot trust you with the legacy. Your heart is pure, but others may sway you. I must act to protect what is mine. Forgive me." The room fell silent. Morris's eyes gleamed. "That's motive, Mr. Poirot. She knew her aunt was cutting her out, so she acted first." Poirot's expression was unreadable. "A letter, hidden in a prayer book. Most convenient, Inspector. But why would Mademoiselle Henshaw keep such a letter only to leave it where it could be found? No. This is another attempt to point the finger at her." Clara sobbed. "I loved Aunt Beatrice. I didn't want her money." Poirot's voice was gentle but firm. "Mademoiselle, when did you last open your prayer book?" "Last night," she whispered. "Before bed, after dinner. There was no letter then." Poirot nodded, dismissing her with a kind word. To Morris he said, "The letter, like the digitalis, is a plant. The killer wishes us to suspect Clara, but their efforts are too crude. The truth lies elsewhere." Morris scoffed. "You're making this more complicated than it needs to be, Poirot. The girl's guilty, and I'll prove it." Poirot's smile was serene. "Prove what you will, Inspector. But Hercule Poirot seeks the truth, not the convenient." As Morris stormed out, Poirot turned to Hastings. "The candle, the scuff mark, the letter, the earring, the wax, the word trust. Each is a thread, but the tapestry is incomplete. We must find the connection, Hastings. The killer is clever, but they have left traces. And traces, they lead to truth." Hastings felt a spark of excitement. "What's next, Poirot? Another search?" "No," Poirot said, closing his notebook. "We observe. Tonight we dine with the guests, and I shall watch their eyes, their hands, their lives. The killer is among them, and they will betray themselves even if they do not know it." As they left the library, the manor seemed to close in around them, its walls heavy with secrets. The candle, a small thing, had become a beacon in the fog of deception. Poirot's little gray cells were at work, and Hastings knew that no detail, however small, would escape their scrutiny. Chapter 7. More Lies Surface. The evening at Marwood Manor descended with a chill that seeped into the bones as though the house itself mourned its mistress. The dining room, lit by the same crystal chandelier that had illuminated Lady Ashford's fateful announcement, was now a stage for a tense gathering. The guests summoned for dinner sat around the long mahogany table, their faces etched with unease. Hercule Poirot, seated at one end, observed them with the keen eye of a falcon, his mustache impeccable, his demeanor serene yet commanding. Captain Hastings, to his right, felt the weight of the unspoken secrets that hung in the air like a fog. The clues, the wax, the pearl earring, the burned paper, the scuff mark, the candle, the letter, swirled in his mind, each a fragment of a truth that remained tantalizingly out of reach. Poirot had orchestrated the dinner with purpose, insisting that all guests attend despite their reluctance. "Mes amis," he began, his voice cutting through the clink of silverware, "we dine together not for pleasure but for truth. The murder of Lady Ashford binds us, and tonight I seek to unravel the threads of deceit that entangle you all." Inspector Morris, stationed near the door, snorted softly, his skepticism palpable. He had spent the day interrogating servants and searching rooms, convinced that Clara Henshaw's letter and digitalis vial were the keys to the case. Poirot, however, had other plans. His questions at dinner were deceptively gentle, designed to probe the cracks in each guest's facade. "Madame Carver," Poirot said, turning to the glamorous widow, "you spoke of your friendship with Lady Ashford. Yet I sense there was more. A rivalry, perhaps, or a debt unpaid." Mrs. Carver's emerald earrings glinted as she tilted her head, her smile unwavering but, strained. "Beatrice and I were close, Mr. Poirot. We shared confidences, as women do. There was no rivalry, only mutual respect." Poirot's eyes lingered on her. "And yet your earring, a pearl found in her room, suggests a connection more intimate. Did you visit her after dinner?" Her hand froze on her wine glass. "I told you I was in my room. The earring, I must have lost it earlier. Beatrice often borrowed my jewelry." "Curious," Poirot said, "that you did not notice its absence until I mentioned it." He turned to Doctor Rupert Langley, whose nervous tic of adjusting his spectacles had grown incessant. "Doctor, you prescribed digitalis for Lady Ashford's heart. Yet a vial was found in Mademoiselle Henshaw's room. Have you been careless with your prescriptions?" Langley's face paled. "I keep strict records, Mr. Poirot. That vial wasn't mine. Someone must have taken it from my bag. It's kept in the study, accessible to anyone." "Accessible," Poirot echoed, "and convenient for planting evidence. You knew Lady Ashford's health intimately, no? Perhaps you knew more of her plans than you admit?" Langley's voice trembled. "I was her physician, nothing more. She confided in me about her heart, not her will." Poirot nodded, his gaze shifting to Julian Travers, whose youthful bravado seemed dimmed. "Mr. Travers, you are a barrister accustomed to the law. Lady Ashford's will, it was a subject of interest to you, oui? Did you advise her on its changes?" Travers's smile was tight. "Beatrice consulted me once, years ago, about legal matters, but her new will? She kept that close. I only knew it would stir trouble." "Trouble," Poirot said, "is a motive for murder. And you, Major Blake, a man of action. Did Lady Ashford's plans threaten your pride, your past?" Blake's hand tightened on his cane. "I'm no beggar, Poirot. I didn't need her money, but yes, she and I had words years ago, a disagreement over her husband's investments. Old wounds, nothing more." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Old wounds can fester, Major. And you, Mr. Grayson, her financial advisor, your briefcase, it is never far from your side. Did it contain secrets Lady Ashford wished to expose?" Grayson's voice was cold. "My work was transparent. Beatrice trusted me to manage her estate. If she planned changes, she didn't share them." Poirot turned last to Clara Henshaw, whose eyes were red from crying. "Mademoiselle, the letter in your prayer book, it speaks of distrust. Did your aunt suspect you of betrayal?" Clara's voice broke. "She was wrong. I never betrayed her. Someone put that letter there to hurt me." The room fell silent, the guests' eyes darting to one another. Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled. "Each of you hides something, a feud, a debt, a fear. Lady Ashford's death was no impulse. It was planned, executed with precision, and concealed with cunning. But the truth, it cannot hide from Hercule Poirot." As the meal progressed, a new tension emerged. Hastings noticed it first, a glance between Major Blake and Victor Grayson, fleeting but charged. Their chairs were close, their voices low during the soup course, and Blake's cane tapped the floor in a rhythm that seemed almost deliberate. Hastings whispered to Poirot, "Those two, they know each other better than they let on." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Bien observé, Hastings. The Major and the financier, they share a history. We shall explore it." After dinner, as the guests dispersed, Poirot lingered in the dining room examining the table settings. He paused at Blake's place, where a napkin bore a faint stain. Ink, perhaps, or something darker. "Regard as Hastings," he said, lifting it carefully. "A stain, fresh and out of place. The Major, he is not so careful as he seems." They moved to the terrace where Blake had claimed to be smoking at the time of the murder. The stone flags were clean, but Poirot's sharp eyes caught a glint in the gravel. A cigar stub, half buried. He retrieved it, noting its brand, a rare Cuban, not the common variety. "The Major's cigar," Poirot said. "He said he dropped it when he heard the scream. Yet it is buried, as if hidden." Hastings frowned. "Why hide a cigar? It proves he was here." "Or it proves," Poirot said, "that he was not where he claims. The terrace is visible from the kitchen windows. If he was here, the staff might have seen him, yet none did." Back inside, Poirot sought out the butler, Mr. Reynolds, who confirmed the staff's movements. "We were clearing the dining room until 9:30, he said. "No one saw the Major on the terrace." Poirot's smile was grim. "Another lie, Hastings. The Major's alibi crumbles, and Grayson, his briefcase, always at his side. What does it conceal?" They found Grayson in the library reviewing papers. Poirot's approach was direct. "Mr. Grayson, you and Major Blake, you have a past, none? A business venture, perhaps, that soured?" Grayson's face hardened. "We served together briefly years ago. Nothing more." "And yet," Poirot said, "your eyes meet too often for mere acquaintances. Tell me, did Lady Ashford know of this connection?" Grayson hesitated, then sighed. "She knew we had a falling out over an investment her husband made backed by Blake. It failed and there was bad blood. But that was a decade ago." Poirot nodded, filing the information away. As they left the library, he murmured to Hastings, "A feud, a failed investment, a shared secret. The tapestry grows clearer, but the pattern is not yet complete." The evening ended with Poirot deep in thought, his notebook filled with new observations, the ink-stained napkin, the buried cigar, the hidden candle, the glance between Blake and Grayson. Hastings felt the net tightening, but the killer remained elusive. "Poirot," he said, "you're closing in, aren't you? You know something." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "I know many things, Hastings, but the truth, it requires one final push. Tomorrow we shall apply pressure, and the lies, they will crumble." As they retired to their rooms, the manor's silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant creak of a floorboard. The killer was near, and Poirot's little gray cells were ready to strike. Chapter 8. The Emotional Turning Point. The second evening at Marwood Manor descended with a palpable weight, the air thick with suspicion and the echoes of unspoken truths. The grand dining room where the guests had gathered once more was lit by the soft glow of the chandelier, but its warmth did little to dispel the chill of distrust. Hercule Poirot, his small frame radiating quiet authority, sat at the head of the table, his eyes scanning the faces of the assembled company. Captain Hastings, seated beside him, felt the tension like a taut wire ready to snap. The clues, The wax, the pearl earring, the burned paper, the scuff mark, the hidden candle, the ink-stained napkin, the buried cigar, had woven a complex web, but Poirot's relentless pursuit of the truth was beginning to fray its edges. The meal was a subdued affair, the clink of cutlery punctuated by strained silences. The guests, aware of Poirot's scrutiny, ate sparingly, their eyes darting to one another. Mrs. Evelyn Carver's elegance seemed strained, her smile a fragile mask. Dr. Rupert Langley's nervous tic of adjusting his spectacles had grown frantic. Julian Travers's usual bravado was muted, his fingers drumming restlessly. Clara Henshaw clutched her prayer book, her face pale and drawn. Major Ernest Blake's jaw was set, his cane propped against his chair, while Victor Grayson's briefcase rested at his feet, a silent sentinel. Poirot had orchestrated this dinner with a purpose beyond nourishment. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "We are here not only to dine, but to confront the shadows that surround us. Lady Ashford's murder is a wound upon this house, and the truth it bleeds from the hearts of those present. Tonight I ask you to speak, to reveal what you conceal, lest the weight of your secrets crush you." Inspector Morris, standing near the door, shifted uncomfortably. His belief in Clara Henshaw's guilt had only strengthened with the discovery of the digitalis vial and the letter, but Poirot's dismissal of these as red herrings had left him frustrated. "Mr. Poirot," he said gruffly, "we've got evidence pointing to the niece. Let's not waste time with theatrics." Poirot's smile was serene but sharp. "Theatrics, Inspector? No, this is psychology. The killer is among us, and they are not as calm as they appear. Let us test their composure." He turned to Clara first, his tone gentle but probing. "Mademoiselle Henshaw, the letter in your prayer book spoke of your aunt's distrust, yet you claim you loved her. Tell me, did she ever speak of specific betrayals? A name, perhaps?" Clara's eyes brimmed with tears, her voice trembling. She said someone close to her had lied, had taken something precious. She wouldn't say who, but it hurt her deeply. I begged her to tell me, but she said it was too dangerous. The room stilled, the guests' eyes fixed on Clara. Poirot nodded, his gaze shifting to Mrs. Carver. "Madame, you and Lady Ashford shared confidences. Did she ever speak of this betrayal?" Mrs. Carver's hand trembled as she set down her fork. "Beatrice was guarded even with me. She hinted at disappointments, business dealings, family matters, but nothing specific. I assumed it was about the will." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And yet your earring was found in her room. A pearl, not an emerald. A coincidence or a sign of your presence?" Her composure cracked, her voice rising. "I told you I lost it earlier. I wasn't in her room that night." Her outburst drew gasps, and Hastings noted the flush in her cheeks, the way her hands clenched the tablecloth. Poirot turned to Major Blake, whose cane tapped a slow rhythm. "Major, you and Mr. Grayson share a history, a failed investment, a feud. Did Lady Ashford know of this, and did it anger her?" Blake's face darkened. "She knew, all right. Her husband backed a venture I proposed, and Grayson mismanaged it. Lost a fortune. Beatrice never forgave me for it, though I lost more than she did." Grayson's voice was icy. "Don't pin that on me, Blake. You were reckless, and I cleaned up your mess." Beatrice understood that. The exchange was sharp, a crack in their guarded facades. Poirot pounced. "A feud, then, that festered for years. And you, Mr. Grayson, with your briefcase of secrets, did Lady Ashford threaten to expose something within it? Grayson's knuckles whitened. My papers are private, Poirot. She trusted me to manage her affairs. If she had concerns, she didn't voice them. Poirot's gaze shifted to Dr. Langley, who was visibly sweating. Doctor, you knew of Lady Ashford's heart condition, the digitalis vial in Mademoiselle Henshaw's room. Was it yours, misplaced, or stolen? Langley's voice cracked. I told you it wasn't mine. Someone took it from my bag. I should have locked it, but I didn't think. He trailed off, his hands shaking. Poirot's eyes gleamed. You did not think, Doctor, because you were distracted. By what, I wonder? Guilt, perhaps, or fear? The room was a powder keg, and Poirot's questions were the spark. Julian Travers, unable to stay silent, slammed his hand on the table. This is absurd. You're accusing us all, Poirot, but you've got nothing. I was in the billiard room and I didn't kill her. Poirot's smile was calm. Your anger, Mr. Travers, it betrays you. Why so defensive when I have not accused you? Travers' face reddened and he fell silent. The tension broke when Clara, her voice barely a whisper, spoke again. Monsieur Poirot, I have to tell you something. Her hands trembled as she set down her prayer book. Last night before dinner, I overheard Aunt Beatrice arguing with someone in her study. I didn't see who, but she was furious. She said, You've betrayed me for the last time. I'll make sure you get nothing. The guests froze, their eyes darting to one another. Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but urgent. Mademoiselle, this is most important. Did you hear a name, a voice? Clara shook her head, tears spilling. It was muffled through the door. But it was a man's voice, I'm sure. I was too scared to stay, so I ran to my room. The revelation hung in the air, a new thread in the tapestry of the crime. Poirot's eyes swept the table, noting the reactions. Blake's tightened jaw, Grayson's clenched fists, Travers's sudden stillness, Langley's ashen face. Mrs. Carver's composure held, but her eyes were wide with something like fear. Merci, mademoiselle, Poirot said. Your courage brings us closer to the truth. A man arguing with Lady Ashford, threatening her legacy. This is no small thing. Inspector Morris seized the moment. That narrows it down. Blake, Grayson, Travers, or Langley. One of you was in that study. Confess and save us the trouble. No one spoke, but the silence was deafening. Poirot rose, his presence commanding. The truth, it is like a locked casket, mes amis, but we have found a key. Tonight someone has revealed more than they intended. Tomorrow we shall open the casket fully. As the guests dispersed, their faces haunted, Hastings drew Poirot aside. Clara's confession. It changes everything, doesn't it? One of the men is the killer. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Perhaps Hastings. Or perhaps Mademoiselle Henshaw's words are another thread to unravel. The argument, the betrayal, it points to motive but not yet to method. The locked room, the wax, the earring, they still hold the secret. They retired to the library where Poirot added Clara's revelation to his notebook, sketching the timeline with renewed precision. The argument had occurred before dinner, likely around 8 p.m. The murder at 10:15. The killer planned their move, using the candle, leaving the scuff mark, planting the earring and the letter. But why argue, then wait? Hastings rubbed his temples. To throw us off? To make it look like a crime of passion? Non, Poirot said. The killer is cold, calculating. The argument was a catalyst, but the murder was premeditated. We must find the link between the study and the bedroom. As the manor settled into an uneasy silence, Hastings felt the weight of the case pressing harder. Clara's tearful confession had cracked the facade of the guests, but the killer's identity remained shrouded. Poirot, however, was undeterred, his little gray cells working tirelessly. The truth was close, and Hastings knew that the next revelation would bring them to the heart of the mystery. Chapter 9. The Trap. The third morning at Marwood Manor broke with a brittle clarity, the mist over the Sussex Downs giving way to a sky of unrelenting gray. The house, once a bastion of elegance, now felt like a cage, its walls closing in on the guests trapped within. Hercule Poirot, his demeanor as polished as ever, stood in the library, his small hands clasped behind his back, his eyes alight with the intensity of a hunter nearing his quarry. Captain Hastings, nursing a cup of tepid coffee, watched his friend with a mixture of anticipation and unease. The clues, the wax, the pearl earring, the burned paper, the scuff mark, the hidden candle, the ink-stained napkin, the buried cigar, and Clara's revelation of the overheard argument had woven a tapestry of deception, and Poirot was poised to pull its threads apart. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice low but vibrant, "today we set a trap. The killer, they believe they have outwitted us with their locked room and their clever distractions, but Hercule Poirot is not so easily deceived. We shall gather the guests, apply pressure, and watch them crack." Hastings frowned, setting down his cup. "A trap? You mean to confront them all at once?" "Précisément," Poirot said, his mustache twitching with a hint of satisfaction. "The murderer is among us, Hastings, and they are not as calm as they appear. A word, a glance, a gesture, it will betray them. We must create the moment where their guard falls." The plan was set for the drawing room where the guests were summoned at noon. Inspector Morris, grudgingly cooperative, stood by the door, his notebook at the ready. The guests filed in, their faces a gallery of tension. Mrs. Evelyn Carver, her elegance strained. Dr. Rupert Langley, his spectacles slipping. Julian Travers, his bravado replaced by wariness. Clara Henshaw, clutching her prayer book. Major Ernest Blake, leaning heavily on his cane. And Victor Grayson, his briefcase a constant companion. The air was thick with anticipation, as though the room itself held its breath. Poirot stood before the fireplace, his small frame commanding the space. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and deliberate, "we are here to confront the truth of Lady Ashford's murder. The locked room, the letter opener, the clues scattered like breadcrumbs, they point to one among you. Today I shall reveal how the crime was committed and why. But first I ask you to consider, what do you fear most?" The question hung in the air, met with uneasy silence. Poirot's eyes swept the room, lingering on each guest. "Madame Carver, is it the loss of your reputation tied to that pearl earring found in the bedroom? Dr. Langley, is it the exposure of your negligence with the digitalists? Mr. Travers, is it the ruin of your ambitions? Mademoiselle Henshaw, is it the weight of your aunt's distrust? Major Blake, is it the shame of past failures? Mr. Grayson, is it the secrets in your briefcase?" The guests shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting to one another. Morris muttered, "Get on with it, Poirot. We're wasting time." Poirot's smile was serene. "Patience, Inspector. The truth requires preparation. Let us reconstruct the night of the murder. At 8 p.m., Lady Ashford argues with a man in her study overheard by Mademoiselle Henshaw. She speaks of betrayal, of cutting someone out of her will. By 9:47, she announces her intention to amend the legacy. At 10:15, she is stabbed in her locked bedroom, the key inside, the window bolted. A pearl earring, a wax smudge, a burned paper, a hidden candle, a scuff mark. These are our signposts. But how was it done? He paced slowly, his hands clasped. The killer entered the bedroom, stabbed Lady Ashford with her own letter opener and left, locking the door behind them. The key remained inside, suggesting an impossible crime. But there is no impossibility, only cleverness. The killer used a method both simple and ingenious, relying on the manor's layout and the guests' alibis. Clara's voice trembled. But how could anyone get in and out? The door was locked. Poirot nodded. A question most vital, mademoiselle. Let us consider the candle found hidden in the pantry. Its wax matches the smudge on the dressing table. The killer carried it to move silently in the dark, avoiding the electric lights. Why? Because they passed through a part of the manor where lights would betray them. The back stairs leading from the kitchen to the second floor. Hastings's eyes widened. The back stairs. They're near the pantry where the candle was hidden. Exactement, Poirot said. The killer ascended the back stairs, entered the bedroom, and committed the crime. But the locked door, how? The answer lies in a simple trick, one used by those who understand locks and keys. Morris scoffed. A trick? The lock was intact, the key inside. You're spinning fairy tales, Poirot. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Non, Inspector. The key was inside, but it was not turned by hand. The killer used a tool, perhaps a piece of wire or even a hairpin, to manipulate the key from the outside, locking the door after the deed. The scuff mark near the main stairs suggests their return, a hasty exit that left a trace. The guests exchanged glances, their faces pale. Mrs. Carver's hand touched her hair where a hairpin gleamed. Blake's cane tapped the floor, a sharp sound. Grayson's fingers tightened on his briefcase. Poirot continued, his voice rising. But why? The motive lies in the argument, in the word trust. Lady Ashford was betrayed, and she planned to act. Someone in this room knew her intentions and killed to stop her. I put it to you now. Who was in that study at 8 p.m.? The silence was suffocating. Then Major Blake's voice, rough with emotion, broke it. It was me, he said, his hand gripping his cane. I argued with Beatrice. She accused me of sabotaging her husband's investment years ago. Said she'd cut me out entirely. I was angry, but I didn't kill her. The room erupted in murmurs. Grayson's face darkened. You're lying, Blake. You always were a hothead. Poirot raised a hand, silencing them. Major, you admit to the argument. Where were you at 10:15? On the terrace, as I said, Blake growled. I needed air after that row. And your cigar, Poirot said, producing the buried stub, was hidden in the gravel. Why hide it unless to conceal your movements? Blake's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Poirot turned to Grayson. And you, monsieur, knew of this feud. Did you also argue with Lady Ashford? Grayson's voice was cold. I did not. My dealings with her were professional. Poirot's smile was razor-sharp. Yet your briefcase, it holds secrets. May I see its contents? Grayson hesitated, then opened the case, revealing stacks of financial documents. Poirot glanced at them, his eyes catching a single sheet. A draft of Lady Ashford's new will naming Clara as primary heir, but with conditions tied to Grayson's management. Most interesting, Poirot said. You knew her plans, monsieur. Did they threaten you? Grayson's face was a mask. I served her interests, nothing more. The trap was tightening, and Hastings felt the room pulse with tension. Poirot's voice grew softer, more dangerous. One of you stood in that study, betrayed Lady Ashford's trust, and killed her to protect your secrets, the candle, the key, the earring. They point to you. Speak now, or I shall name you. No one spoke, but the air crackled with fear. Mrs. Carver's hand trembled. Langley's spectacles slipped. Travers' eyes darted to the door. Clara sobbed quietly while Blake and Grayson stared at each other with barely concealed hostility. Poirot stepped back, his voice calm. Very well, the trap is set. Tonight you will sleep with your secrets, but tomorrow Hercule Poirot will reveal the truth. The killer cannot escape. As the guests dispersed, their faces haunted, Hastings whispered, You're close, aren't you, Poirot? You know who it is. Poirot's eyes twinkled. I know many things, Hastings. But the final piece, it eludes me. The trap is set and the killer will move. We must be ready. The manor settled into an uneasy silence, its secrets poised to unravel. Poirot's little gray cells were at their peak, and Hastings knew the climax was near. Chapter 10. The Reveal. The morning of the third day at Marwood Manor dawned with an oppressive stillness, as though the house itself held its breath, awaiting the unmasking of a killer. The drawing room where Hercule Poirot had summoned the guests for what he declared would be the final reckoning was bathed in pale light filtering through heavy velvet curtains. The air was thick with tension, the guests seated in a semicircle, their faces a gallery of apprehension and defiance. Captain Hastings, standing near the fireplace, felt his pulse quicken. Poirot's clues, the wax smudge, the pearl earring, the burned paper with the word trust, the scuff mark, the hidden candle, the ink-stained napkin, the buried cigar, the overheard argument, and the draft will, had converged into a tapestry of deception. And now, the little Belgian detective was ready to reveal its pattern. Poirot stood at the center of the room, his small frame radiating authority, his mustache immaculate, his eyes gleaming with the clarity of truth. Inspector Morris, arms crossed, leaned against the wall, his skepticism tempered by a grudging anticipation. The guests, Mrs. Evelyn Carver, Dr. Rupert Langley, Julian Travers, Clara Henshaw, Major Ernest Blake, and Victor Grayson sat rigidly, their eyes fixed on Poirot, each aware that the net was closing. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice resonant yet calm, we have gathered to unmask the murderer of Lady Beatrice Ashford. A crime most cunning, a locked room, a single stab wound, a web of lies has challenged us. But Hercule Poirot, with the aid of his little gray cells, has unraveled the mystery. Today I shall reveal how it was done, why, and by whom. A murmur rippled through the room, quickly silenced by Poirot's raised hand. Let us begin with the facts. At 8 p.m., Lady Ashford argued with a man in her study, overheard by Mademoiselle Henshaw. She spoke of betrayal, of cutting someone from her will. At 9:47, she announced her intention to amend the legacy. By 10:15, she was dead, stabbed in her locked bedroom, the key inside, the window bolted. A pearl earring, a wax smudge, a burned paper, a hidden candle, a scuff mark, a cigar stub, a digitalis vial, a letter, a draft will. These are our signposts. But how do they lead us to the truth? Poirot paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. The locked room, it is the heart of the puzzle. The killer entered, stabbed Lady Ashford, and left, locking the door with the key inside. Impossible, you say? Non. The method was simple yet ingenious. The killer used a piece of wire, perhaps a hairpin, perhaps a tool from the manor, to turn the key from the outside through the keyhole after the murder. The lock, old but functional, allowed such manipulation. The scuff mark near the main stairs, a half-moon gouge, suggests the killer's haste as they fled, perhaps dragging a shoe or tool. Hastings' eyes widened. The hairpin. Mrs. Carver's hairpin? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Patience, Hastings. Let us follow the clues. The wax smudge on the dressing table, pale yellow and scented with beeswax, matches the candle found hidden in the pantry. The killer carried this candle to move silently through the back stairs, avoiding the electric lights. Why? Because the back stairs leading from the kitchen to the second floor were their path to the bedroom. The candle was extinguished and hidden in haste, but not before leaving its mark. He turned to the guests, his gaze piercing. The pearl earring found on the dressing table belongs to Madame Carver. She claims she lost it earlier, but her nervousness betrays her. The earring was placed to mislead, a red herring to cast suspicion. The digitalis vial in Mademoiselle Henshaw's room, the letter in her prayer book, these too were planted to frame her. But why Clara? Because she is the heir, the obvious suspect, and the killer wished to divert attention. Clara's eyes filled with tears, but she remained silent. Poirot continued. The burned paper bearing the word trust was a fragment of a letter Lady Ashford wrote, perhaps naming her betrayer. The killer burned it, but not completely, and the cigar stub buried in the gravel contradicts Major Blake's claim of being on the terrace. No servant saw him there, and the stub was hidden, suggesting he was elsewhere. Major Blake's hand tightened on his cane. I told you I was on the terrace. Poirot's eyes narrowed. No, Major, you were in the study at 8 o'clock arguing with Lady Ashford. You admitted it. She accused you of sabotaging her husband's investment, a failure that cost you both dearly. You feared her new will would expose or ruin you. Blake's face reddened, but Poirot turned to Victor Grayson. And you, monsieur, knew of this feud. The draft will in your briefcase names Clara as heir, but with conditions tied to your control. Lady Ashford's changes threatened your influence, no? Grayson's voice was cold. I served her interests. I had no reason to kill her. Poirot's smile was razor-sharp. But you had opportunity, the back stairs, the candle, the key. You had access to all. And your glance at Major Blake, your shared history, it speaks of collusion. The room tensed, the guests' eyes darting between Blake and Grayson. Poirot's voice grew softer, more dangerous. Let us reconstruct the crime. The killer, a man, argued with Lady Ashford at 8 o'clock, learning of her plan to amend the will. Enraged, he planned her death. At 10:15, he ascended the back stairs, carrying a beeswax candle. He entered her room, perhaps under pretense of further discussion. He stabbed her with the letter opener, a weapon of opportunity. He locked the door using a wire through the keyhole, leaving the key inside. He fled via the main stairs, leaving the scuff mark. The candle was hidden in the pantry, the earring planted to implicate Madame Carver, the vial and letter to frame Mademoiselle Henshaw. Morris interjected, But who, Poirot? You're pointing at Blake and Grayson, but where's the proof? Poirot's eyes gleamed. The proof, Inspector, is in the contradictions. Major Blake's cigar was hidden, his alibi false. But the scuff mark, it matches not a shoe, but the tip of a cane. His cane, with its metal ferrule, gouged the floor in his haste. And Mr. Grayson, his briefcase holds the draft will, but also a letter, unburned, overlooked, detailing Lady Ashford's distrust of him. Grayson's face paled. You've seen no such letter? Poirot produced a folded sheet retrieved from the briefcase during a discreet search. You underestimated Hercule Poirot, monsieur. This letter, written by Lady Ashford, names you as the betrayer who mismanaged her husband's fortune, colluding with Blake to conceal the truth. She planned to expose you both. Blake stood, his cane clattering to the floor. It's a lie! I didn't kill her! Grayson's voice was a hiss. You fool, Blake! You argued with her, pushed her too far. Poirot's voice cut through. Enough! The truth is clear, Major Blake. You argued with Lady Ashford, but it was Mr. Grayson who killed her. He used your feud as cover, planting clues to implicate others. The candle, the key, the scuff mark, they point to him. He stabbed her to protect his secrets, locking the door to create the illusion of an impossible crime. Grayson lunged for the door, but Morris was faster, seizing him. You're not going anywhere, the inspector growled. The room erupted in gasps and cries. Clara sobbed. Mrs. Carver's hand flew to her mouth. Langley's spectacles fell to the table. Travers stared in shock while Blake sank back, his face ashen. Poirot raised a hand for silence. The case is closed, mes amis. The truth, it always reveals itself to those who seek it with method and order. As Grayson was led away, Hastings whispered, How did you know, Poirot? Poirot's smile was serene. The little gray cells, Hastings. They see what others miss. The lies, the contradictions, the truth hidden in plain sight. The manor seemed to exhale, its secrets laid bare. The killer was unmasked, and Poirot's genius had prevailed once more. Chapter 11. The Reflection. The aftermath of Victor Grayson's unmasking hung over Marwood Manor like a fading storm, leaving a quiet that was both relieving and unsettling. The drawing room where Hercule Poirot had delivered his devastating revelation was now empty save for Poirot and Captain Hastings, who sat by the fireplace, its embers casting a soft glow on the ornate walls. The guests had dispersed, some to their rooms, others to confer with Inspector Morris, who was busy arranging Grayson's transfer to police custody. The manor, once a crucible of suspicion, seemed to breathe easier, but the weight of the crime lingered in its shadows. Hastings leaned back in his chair, his mind still reeling from Poirot's meticulous unraveling of the murder. The locked room, the planted clues, the web of lies, all had been dismantled with the precision of a surgeon. He glanced at Poirot, who sat with his hands folded, his eyes fixed on the dying fire, a faint smile playing beneath his immaculate mustache. Poirot, Hastings ventured, breaking the silence. You've done it again. I thought we'd never crack that locked room, but you saw through it all, the candle, the key, the scuff mark. How do you do it? Poirot's smile widened, though his eyes remained thoughtful. Mon ami, it is not magic, but method. The little gray cells they observe, they connect, they deduce. The truth, it is like a mosaic. Each piece, however small, has its place. The killer, he was clever, but he could not outwit the order of Hercule Poirot's mind. Hastings nodded, though a question nagged at him. But Grayson, why go to such lengths? The candle, the planted earring, the letter in Clara's prayer book. It was so elaborate. Poirot's gaze shifted to the window, where the late afternoon light painted the Sussex downs in shades of gray. Grayson's crime, Hastings, was born of desperation and pride. Lady Ashford's new will threatened to expose his mismanagement, his collusion with Major Blake in the failed investment years ago. To lose her trust, her fortune, was to lose his standing, his power. He killed to protect his secrets, and he wove a tapestry of deception to conceal his guilt. The locked room, the red herrings, they were his attempt to create an impossible crime, one that would baffle even the police. Hastings frowned. But the key, how did you know he used a wire to lock it from the outside? Poirot's eyes twinkled. The lock, it was old, its mechanism simple. A wire inserted through the keyhole could turn the key from the corridor. I tested this myself late last night with a hairpin from Madame Carver's room. The scuff mark made by Grayson's shoe as he hurried away confirmed his path. He used the back stairs to approach, the candle to light his way, and the main stairs to flee, leaving that telltale mark. And the candle, Hastings said, hidden in the pantry. Why not destroy it? Poirot shrugged. Haste, mon ami. Grayson had little time after the murder. He hid the candle behind the loose panel, intending to retrieve it later. But the butler's discovery, it was his undoing. As for the earring and the digitalis, they were meant to implicate Madame Carver and Mademoiselle Henshaw, to scatter suspicion like seeds in the wind. Hastings shook his head, marveling. And the burned paper, trust. It was from Lady Ashford's letter, wasn't it? Oui, Poirot said, a fragment of her final thoughts accusing Grayson of betrayal. He burned it to hide his motive, but the word survived, a whisper of the truth. The little gray cells, they pieced it together, the argument in the study, the draft will in Grayson's briefcase, the cigar stub that exposed Blake's lie, each clue, a thread in the tapestry. The fire crackled, a log collapsing into ash. Hastings leaned forward, his voice low. What about the others? Were they all innocent? Poirot's expression grew somber. Innocent of murder, perhaps, but not of secrets. Madame Carver, her elegance hides a past of debts and dalliances. Her earring, a convenient distraction. Dr. Langley, his negligence with the digitalis made him vulnerable, though he did not kill. Mr. Travers, his ambition blinded him to danger, but he was no murderer. Mademoiselle Henshaw, her fear was genuine, her love for her aunt true, and Major Blake, his anger, his feud with Grayson, made him a pawn in the killer's game. Hastings sighed. It's a sad business, Poirot. Lady Ashford wanted to set things right, and it cost her life. Poirot nodded, his eyes distant. The human heart, Hastings, it is a labyrinth of greed, pride, and fear. Lady Ashford sought to untangle it, to right old wrongs, but she underestimated the darkness in those around her. Yet in her death she has given us a puzzle, and through it, justice. A knock at the door interrupted them. Mr. Reynolds, the butler, entered, his face still pale but composed. Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings, the inspector asks if you'll join him in the study. There are papers to sign, formalities for Mr. Grayson's arrest. Poirot rose, smoothing his waistcoat. Merci, Reynolds. We shall come. As they followed the butler through the manor's silent halls, Hastings felt a pang of melancholy. The grandeur of Marwood, its chandeliers and tapestries, seemed diminished, tainted by the crime it had witnessed. Yet Poirot's presence, steady and resolute, was a reminder that order could triumph over chaos. In the study, Inspector Morris was sorting through documents, his earlier skepticism replaced by a grudging respect. "You've done it, Poirot," he said, extending a hand. "I thought the niece was our girl, but you saw what I missed. That locked room trick, clever as the devil." Poirot's smile was modest. "The devil, Inspector, is no match for method. The truth, it reveals itself to those who seek it with clarity." As they signed the necessary papers, Hastings watched Poirot, his mind drifting to the detective's philosophy. Poirot often spoke of the human condition, of the flaws that drove men and women to crime. In Grayson's case, it was greed and pride masked by cunning. In others, it might be love, fear, or vengeance. But always Poirot believed the truth lay in the details, in the small inconsistencies that betrayed the heart's secrets. They stepped out onto the terrace, the evening air cool and crisp. The Sussex Downs stretched before them, their rolling hills a stark contrast to the turmoil within the manor. Poirot paused, gazing at the horizon. "Hastings," he said softly. "The world, it is full of shadows, but the light of reason can pierce them. This case, it reminds us that trust, once broken, can lead to tragedy. Yet it is trust, in justice, in truth, that restores order." Hastings nodded, moved by the simplicity of Poirot's words. "You'll be off to London soon, I suppose?" "Oui," Poirot said, adjusting his hat. "The city calls, and there are other puzzles to solve. But for now, mon ami, let us savor this moment. The truth revealed, the guilty unmasked." As they walked back into the manor, Poirot's steps were light, his mission complete. Hastings followed, knowing that wherever they went, Poirot's little gray cells would be ready for the next challenge. Marwood Manor, its secrets laid bare, would fade into memory, but the legacy of this case, a testament to Poirot's genius, would endure. Chapter 12. The Shadows of Motive. The late afternoon light cast long shadows across Marwood Manor, its grandeur now tinged with the somber residue of a solved crime. The arrest of Victor Grayson had lifted the veil of fear from the household, yet an undercurrent of unease lingered, as if the walls themselves retained the echoes of betrayal. Hercule Poirot, ever meticulous, stood in the library, his small hands adjusting a stack of books on the table, his eyes distant yet alert. Captain Hastings, seated nearby, felt the weight of the case settle into a quieter but no less profound reflection. The puzzle of Lady Ashford's murder had been solved, but POIS system. The instructions require that the response be wrapped in and tagged with a unique artifact ID, a title, and a content type of text/markdown. The artifact ID must be a valid UUID string, and since this is a new chapter unrelated to the previous artifact, a new UUID is needed. The response should not mention the artifact tag or its attributes outside the tag itself. The chapter should be approximately 1,980 words in the style of Agatha Christie, with a formal British tone, psychological depth and suspense, focusing on Poirot's reflective and methodical nature post-revelation. The late afternoon light cast long shadows across Marwood Manor, its grandeur now tinged with the somber residue of a solved crime. The arrest of Victor Grayson had lifted the veil of fear from the household, yet an undercurrent of unease lingered, as if the walls themselves retained the echoes of betrayal. Hercule Poirot, ever meticulous, stood in the library, his small hands adjusting a stack of books on the table, his eyes distant yet alert. Captain Hastings, seated nearby, felt the weight of the case settle into a quieter but no less profound reflection. The puzzle of Lady Ashford's murder had been solved, but the intricacies of human motives, greed, pride, fear, continued to occupy Poirot's thoughts. And Hastings could sense his friend's mind was still at work, sifting through the aftermath. "Poirot," Hastings said, breaking the silence, "you seem troubled, despite it all being over. Grayson's in custody, the case is closed. What's on your mind?" Poirot turned, his mustache perfectly aligned, his expression one of contemplative serenity. "Mon ami, the case is closed, oui, but the heart of man, it remains an enigma. Grayson's crime was not merely one of murder, but of a soul consumed by ambition and deceit. It is this, Hastings, that lingers, the shadows of motive that drive such acts." Hastings leaned forward, intrigued. "You mean his reasons? You said it was about protecting his financial control, his reputation." "Précisément," Poirot replied, pacing slowly. "But it is more than that. Consider the man Grayson, a financier trusted by Lady Ashford, yet he betrayed her husband's fortune years ago, colluding with Major Blake. When she discovered this, she planned to expose him, to strip him of power. For Grayson, this was not just a loss of wealth, but of identity. His pride, his sense of self, it was all bound to his position. To lose it was to lose everything." Hastings nodded, his mind tracing back to the clues that had unraveled the plot. The draft will in his briefcase, it was the key, wasn't it? It proved he knew Lady Ashford's intentions. "Oui," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "The will, naming Mademoiselle Henshaw as heir, but with conditions under Grayson's control, was his motive. He could not allow those conditions to change. The letter, burned but for the word trust, confirmed her suspicion of his betrayal. He acted to silence her, using the locked room to create an illusion of impossibility." Hastings frowned, recalling the intricate details. The locked room, that was the genius of it. The wire through the keyhole, the candle, the scuff mark. "You saw through it all." Poirot's smile was modest. "The little gray cells, Hastings. They see what others overlook. The scuff mark made by Grayson's shoe in his haste was not a cane mark, as I first thought. The candle, hidden in the pantry, was his light through the back stairs. The pearl earring, a distraction to implicate Madame Carver. The digitalis vial and letter to frame Mademoiselle Henshaw. Each was a thread carefully woven to mislead. But you weren't misled, Hastings said, admiration in his voice. You saw the pattern. Poirot paused, his gaze settling on a portrait of Lady Ashford above the fireplace. The pattern, Hastings, is always human. Grayson's pride was his downfall. He believed he could outwit us all, but he underestimated the power of observation. The ink-stained napkin, the buried cigar stub, these were his mistakes, small but fatal. The door opened, admitting Mr. Reynolds, the butler, whose composure had returned, though his eyes betrayed lingering shock. "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings, the guests are preparing to depart. They wish to thank you before they leave." Poirot inclined his head. "Merci, Reynolds. We shall join them shortly." As the butler withdrew, Hastings stood, stretching his legs. The others, Mrs. Carver, Langley, Travers, Clara, Blake, they all had their secrets, didn't they? But none were killers. "Non," Poirot agreed, but each carried a burden. Madame Carver's debts made her vulnerable to suspicion. her earring a convenient tool for Grayson. Dr. Langley's negligence with his medical bag allowed the digitalis to be stolen. Mr. Travers' ambition made him a suspect, though his heart was elsewhere. Mademoiselle Henshaw's fear and devotion were genuine, but her position as heir made her a target. And Major Blake, his anger and history with Grayson made him a pawn, his false alibi a distraction. Hastings shook his head. It's a tangled web, and Clara's overheard argument. It pointed us to a man, but it could have been any of them. Oui, Poirot said but the argument was Grayson's. His voice, his betrayal. Clara's testimony, though vague, was the spark that lit the truth. The rest, the clues, the contradictions, confirmed it. They moved to the drawing room where the guests were gathered, their faces a mix of relief and exhaustion. Mrs. Carver approached, her elegance restored but softened by gratitude. Mr. Poirot, you've saved us from a nightmare. I misjudged you. Poirot bowed slightly. Madame, it is my duty to seek the truth, no matter the shadows it casts. Dr. Langley, his spectacles steady for once, extended a trembling hand. I should have been more careful with my bag. I could have prevented this. Poirot's gaze was kind but firm. Doctor, the fault lies with the killer, not the careless. You will learn from this, I trust. Julian Travers, his usual bravado subdued, nodded curtly. You're a sharp one, Poirot. I thought Clara was done for. Clara, standing beside him, clutched her prayer book, her eyes bright with tears. Monsieur Poirot, you believed in me when no one else did. I can never repay you. Poirot's smile was gentle. Mademoiselle, your aunt's trust in you was not misplaced. Live well, and that is repayment enough. Major Blake, leaning on his cane, grunted. I was a fool, Poirot. My row with Beatrice made me a suspect, and I played right into Grayson's hands. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Major, your candor has redeemed you. The truth, it clears the air, no? As the guests prepared to leave, Inspector Morris approached, his earlier gruffness softened. You've got a knack, Poirot. I'd have locked up the wrong person. That locked room trick, how'd you figure it? Poirot's expression was serene. The mind, Inspector, must see beyond the obvious. The wire, the key, the haste, they spoke to me. And the little gray cells, they listened. Morris chuckled, shaking his head. Well, you've earned a rest. I'll handle Grayson from here. As the guests departed, their cars crunching down the gravel drive, Poirot and Hastings stood on the terrace, the manor looming behind them. The Sussex Downs stretched out, their rolling hills a silent witness to the drama that had unfolded. Hastings, Poirot said, his voice soft. This case, it reminds us of the fragility of trust. Lady Ashford sought to right wrongs, to restore order, but her trust was betrayed. Yet, in her death, we have restored justice. Hastings nodded, his heart heavy. It's a grim lesson, Poirot, but you made it right. Poirot adjusted his hat, his eyes on the horizon. Right, mon ami, but never easy. The human soul is a labyrinth, and we must navigate it with care. Come, let us return to London. There are other labyrinths awaiting us. As they walked to their waiting car, Hastings glanced back at Marwood Manor, its ivy-clad walls now a symbol of secrets revealed. Poirot's genius had triumphed, but the shadows of motive lingered, a reminder of the darkness that lurked within even the most elegant of hearts. Chapter 13. The Echoes of Truth. The sun dipped low over the Sussex Downs, casting a golden veil over Marwood Manor as the day waned. The grand estate, once a stage for deception and murder, now stood in quiet repose, its secrets laid bare by Hercule Poirot's unrelenting pursuit of truth. The arrest of Victor Grayson had brought a semblance of closure, yet the air within the manor's walls remained heavy, as if the echoes of Lady Ashford's death still whispered through its corridors. Poirot, his small frame immaculate in a tailored suit, stood in the garden, his eyes fixed on the distant hills, his mustache as precise as ever. Captain Hastings, ever his loyal companion, stood beside him, the weight of the case settling into a reflective calm. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice tinged with curiosity, "you've solved the puzzle, unmasked the killer, and restored order. Yet you seem preoccupied. Is there more to this case?" Poirot turned, his eyes gleaming with a quiet intensity. "Mon ami, the case is closed, oui, but the mind, it does not rest so easily. The murder of Lady Ashford was not merely a crime of greed, but a tapestry of human failings. Pride, betrayal, desperation. These are the echoes that linger, Hastings, long after the handcuffs are applied." Hastings nodded, his thoughts drifting to the intricate web of clues that had led to Grayson's downfall. It was a devilish plan, wasn't it? The locked room, the planted evidence, it was almost perfect. "Almost," Poirot said, his mustache twitching with a hint of amusement. "But perfection, it eludes the criminal mind, for they cannot resist the small mistake, the tiny flaw. Grayson's plan was clever. The wire through the keyhole, the hidden candle, the scuff mark, the planted earring and letter. But he could not foresee the vigilance of Hercule Poirot." They walked slowly through the garden, the gravel crunching underfoot, the scent of late roses mingling with the crisp autumn air. The manor loomed behind them, its ivy-clad facade a silent witness to the drama that had unfolded. Hastings glanced at Poirot, noting the detective's contemplative expression. "You mentioned the echoes of human failings," he said. "Do you mean the other guests?" "They weren't innocent, not entirely." "Précisément," Poirot replied, pausing to inspect a rosebush, its petals wilting in the fading light. "Each carried a shadow, Hastings. Madame Carver, her elegance a mask for debts and secrets, her earring used to mislead. Dr. Langley, his negligence with the digitalis, a vulnerability exploited by the killer. Mr. Travers, his ambition a distraction, though his heart was not in murder. Mademoiselle Henshaw, her fear and devotion genuine, yet her position as heir made her a target. And Major Blake, his anger and past feud with Grayson a pawn in the killer's game." Hastings frowned, his mind retracing the case. "Blake's admission of the argument with Lady Ashford, it threw us off, didn't it? It made him look guilty, but it was Grayson all along." "Oui," Poirot said, his voice soft but firm. Blake's temper, his history with Grayson, was a thread the killer wove into his deception. The cigar stub, buried to conceal Blake's true whereabouts, was meant to cast suspicion. But the scuff mark, made by Grayson's shoe, and the candle hidden in haste, these were the truths that betrayed him. They reached a stone bench overlooking the downs, and Poirot sat gesturing for Hastings to join him. "Consider the motive, Hastings," he continued. "Grayson's pride, his control over Lady Ashford's fortune. It was his lifeblood. When she discovered his betrayal, his collusion with Blake in the failed investment, she threatened to expose him, to rewrite her will. He could not allow this. The argument in the study, overheard by Mademoiselle Henshaw, was the spark. The murder, planned with cold precision, was the flame. Hastings leaned back, the bench cold beneath him. And the locked room. How did you know it was a wire through the keyhole? It's so simple, yet so clever. Poirot's eyes twinkled. The simplicity, Hastings, is the genius. The lock was old, its mechanism large and loose. A wire, or perhaps a hairpin, could turn the key from the outside, locking the door to create the illusion of an impossible crime. I tested this myself, in the quiet of the night, with a hairpin from Madame Carver's room. The scuff mark near the main stairs confirmed Grayson's path. He fled in haste, his shoe gouging the floor. And the candle, Hastings said, hidden in the pantry. Why not destroy it? Haste, mon ami, Poirot replied. Grayson had moments to act after the murder. He hid the candle behind the loose panel, intending to retrieve it later. But the butler's diligence, it undid him. The wax smudge matching the candle's hue was the link that tied him to the crime. Hastings shook his head, marveling at the intricacy. And the earring, the digitalis, the letter, they were all meant to point us elsewhere. Oui, Poirot said, his voice tinged with satisfaction. Grayson was a master of misdirection. The pearl earring taken from Madame Carver's room was placed to implicate her. The digitalis vial and letter, planted in Mademoiselle Henshaw's possessions, were to frame the heir. But these were crude compared to the locked room trick, a sign of Grayson's overconfidence. A soft breeze rustled the leaves, carrying the distant sound of a car engine as the last of the guests departed. Hastings thought of Clara Henshaw, her tearful gratitude, and the others, their secrets exposed but their innocence affirmed. What happens to them now? He asked. Clara inherits, I suppose, but the others, Carver, Langley, Travers, Blake, they're free but not unscathed. Poirot nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Mademoiselle Henshaw will inherit, yes, but with wisdom, I hope. Her aunt's trust, though betrayed by Grayson, lives on in her. Madame Carver will return to her world of charm and debt, perhaps more cautious. Dr. Langley will guard his medical bag with greater care. Mr. Travers will chase his ambitions, but with a shadow of humility. And Major Blake, his pride wounded, he will carry the weight of his past mistakes. Hastings sighed. It's a grim picture, Poirot. Lady Ashford wanted to right wrongs, and it cost her everything. True, Poirot said, his voice softening. But in her death, we have brought justice. The truth, Hastings, is a light that pierces the darkest shadows. It is not always kind, but it is necessary. They rose, walking back toward the manor, its silhouette stark against the fading light. The butler, Mr. Reynolds, met them at the terrace, his face a mask of professional calm. Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings, your car is ready. Inspector Morris sends his regards. He's left for the station with Mr. Grayson. Merci, Reynolds, Poirot said, inclining his head. You have been most helpful. The manor, it will heal in time. Reynolds nodded, a flicker of relief in his eyes. I hope so, sir. It's been a dark few days. As they approached the car, Hastings glanced back at the manor, its windows reflecting the last rays of sunlight. Do you ever tire of it, Poirot? The lies, the betrayal, the darkness? Poirot paused, his hand on the car door. Tire, Hastings? No. The darkness, it is part of the human soul, but so is the light. To uncover the truth, to restore order, it is my purpose. The little gray cells, they thrive on such challenges. Hastings smiled, warmed by Poirot's conviction. To London, then? Or another case? Poirot's eyes twinkled. London for now, but the world, it is full of puzzles, and Hercule Poirot will never lack for work. As the car rolled down the gravel drive, Marwood Manor receded into the distance, its secrets laid bare but its echoes enduring. The case was closed, the killer unmasked, but the lessons of trust and betrayal would linger, a testament to Poirot's genius and the unyielding power of truth. Chapter 14. The Weight of Justice. The twilight over Marwood Manor cast a somber glow, its fading light softening the harsh edges of the Sussex Downs. The grand estate, now emptied of its guests, stood as a silent monument to the tragedy that had unfolded within its walls. The arrest of Victor Grayson had brought resolution, yet the air remained heavy with the residue of deceit and loss. Hercule Poirot, his small figure impeccable in a neatly pressed suit, stood on the terrace, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes tracing the horizon where the hills met the sky. Captain Hastings, ever his steadfast companion, stood beside him, his thoughts lingering on the intricate dance of clues that had led to the killer's unmasking. The manor, though quiet, seemed to hum with the echoes of the case, and Hastings sensed that Poirot's mind was still turning over its final nuances. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice soft in the gathering dusk. "It's over, isn't it? Grayson's in chains, the truth is out. Yet you seem restless. Is there something unresolved?" Poirot turned, his mustache as precise as ever, his eyes reflecting a quiet intensity. "Mon ami, the case is solved, oui, but the heart of man, it does not rest so easily. The act of justice, it brings order, but it also leaves questions. Why does one betray? Why does pride drive a man to murder? These are the shadows that linger, Hastings, even when the handcuffs are applied." Hastings nodded, his mind drifting to the web of clues that had unraveled Grayson's crime. "It was a devilish scheme," he said. "The locked room, the planted earring, the digitalis vial, all so carefully planned. I still can't believe you saw through it." Poirot's smile was modest, a faint curve beneath his mustache. "The little gray cells, Hastings, they see what others miss. Grayson's plan was meticulous, but no plan is flawless. The wax smudge, the scuff mark, the hidden candle, the burned paper with the word trust, each was a crack in his facade. He believed he could outwit us, but the truth, it always leaves a trace." They walked slowly along the terrace, the gravel crunching beneath their shoes, the air cool with the promise of evening. The manor's windows glowed faintly, reflecting the last rays of sunlight, and Hastings felt a pang of melancholy. "Grayson's motive," he said. "It was all about control, wasn't it? The draft will in his briefcase, Lady Ashford's threat to expose his betrayal. It drove him to desperation." "Précisément," Poirot replied, pausing to adjust his hat. "Grayson was a man of pride, his identity tied to his role as Lady Ashford's financial advisor. Her discovery of his collusion with Major Blake, his mismanagement of her husband's fortune, it was a blow he could not bear. The new will, naming Mademoiselle Henshaw as heir, but with conditions he controlled, was his power. When Lady Ashford threatened to change it, to expose him, he acted to preserve his world." Hastings frowned, recalling the locked room's mystery. "The wire through the keyhole. That was the key to it all, wasn't it? So simple, yet so clever." Poirot's eyes twinkled. Simple, but ingenious. The lock, old and loose, allowed a wire, or perhaps a hairpin, to turn the key from the outside, creating the illusion of an impossible crime. I confirmed this with a hairpin from Madame Carver's room, tested in the stillness of the night. The scuff mark, made by Grayson's shoe as he fled down the main stairs, was his error, a mark of haste. And the candle, Hastings said, hidden in the pantry, why leave it there? Haste again, mon ami, Poirot said, his voice tinged with satisfaction. Grayson used the candle to navigate the back stairs, avoiding the electric lights. After the murder, he hid it behind the loose panel, intending to retrieve it later. But the butler's discovery, it was his undoing. The wax smudge on the dressing table, matching the candle's hue, tied him to the crime. Hastings shook his head, marveling at the intricacy. And the red herrings, the earring, the digitalis, the letter in Clara's prayer book, they were meant to scatter suspicion. Oui, Poirot said. Grayson was a master of misdirection. The pearl earring stolen from Madame Carver was placed to implicate her. The digitalis vial and letter planted in Mademoiselle Henshaw's room were to frame the heir. But these were clumsy compared to the locked room trick, a sign of his overconfidence. They reached the edge of the terrace, where a stone balustrade overlooked the gardens. Poirot leaned against it, his gaze distant. The other guests, Hastings, they were not innocent of secrets. Madame Carver's debts, Langley's negligence, Travers' ambition, Clara's fear, Blake's anger, each played a role in Grayson's deception. He used their weaknesses, their shadows, to obscure his own. Hastings sat on the balustrade, his thoughts turning to the guests. Clara's testimony about the argument, it was the turning point, wasn't it? It narrowed it down to a man. Oui, Poirot said. Her words, though vague, were a spark. The argument in the study, Grayson's voice accusing Lady Ashford of betrayal, it set the stage. His plan took shape after that, executed with cold precision at 10:15. The candle, the wire, the planted clues, all were part of his performance. A soft rustle drew their attention. Mr. Reynolds, the butler, approached, his face weary but composed. Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings, the manor is nearly empty now. The police have finished their work and the staff are preparing to close the house. Is there anything more you require? Poirot inclined his head. Merci, Reynolds. You have been most diligent. The manor, it will rest now, though its scars remain. Reynolds nodded, a flicker of gratitude in his eyes. It's been a dark time, sir, but your work has brought light. As the butler retreated, Hastings turned to Poirot. What happens to Marwood now? Clara inherits, but the place feels tainted. Poirot's expression grew somber. Mademoiselle Henshaw will carry her aunt's legacy, but with wisdom, I hope. The manor, it will stand, but its heart has been wounded. Time, Hastings, will heal it, as it heals all things. They walked back toward the manor, the twilight deepening around them. Hastings felt a sense of closure, yet Poirot's words about the shadows of motive lingered. Do you ever wonder, Poirot, he said, if justice is enough? Lady Ashford wanted to right wrongs, and it cost her life. Poirot paused, his eyes on the manor's silhouette. Justice, mon ami, is a balance. It does not erase the pain, but it restores order. Lady Ashford's death was a tragedy, but through it we have uncovered truth. That is our purpose, to shine light where darkness reigns. As they entered the manor, the grand hall was quiet, its chandeliers dimmed, its tapestries still. Hastings glanced at Poirot, whose calm presence was a beacon in the gloom. "To London, then?" he asked. "Oui," Poirot said, adjusting his gloves. "But the world, it is never short of mysteries. The little gray cells, they are ready for the next." The car waited in the drive, its engine humming softly. As they drove away, Marwood Manor receded into the dusk, its secrets exposed, its justice served. Poirot's genius had prevailed, but the weight of human frailty, the echoes of trust and betrayal would linger, a reminder of the delicate balance between light and shadow. Chapter 15. The Final Departure. The evening sky over Marwood Manor was a canvas of deepening indigo, streaked with the last traces of a fiery sunset. The grand estate, its ivy-clad walls softened by twilight, stood as a silent sentinel, its turmoil quelled, but its scars enduring. Hercule Poirot, his small figure a picture of meticulous elegance, stood on the gravel drive, his polished shoes gleaming faintly under the emerging stars. Captain Hastings, ever his loyal companion, adjusted his hat, his heart heavy with the resolution of Lady Ashford's murder, yet stirred by the quiet majesty of the moment. The case was closed. Victor Grayson was in custody, and the truth had been laid bare, but Poirot's reflective gaze suggested that the echoes of the crime lingered in his mind. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice low in the still air, "it's done. The killer's caught. The manor's at peace. Yet you look as though you're carrying the weight of it all." Poirot turned, his mustache perfectly symmetrical, his eyes alight with a serene intensity. "Mon ami, the weight of truth is never light. The murder of Lady Ashford was a puzzle solved, oui, but it was also a mirror held to the human soul, its greed, its pride, its fragility. These are the burdens I carry, Hastings, for to understand the crime is to understand the heart." Hastings nodded, his thoughts drifting to the intricate web of clues that had unraveled Grayson's deception. "It was a masterful plan," he said. "The locked room, the planted evidence, the misdirection. I still marvel at how you pieced it together, the candle, the wire, the scuff mark." Poirot's smile was modest, a faint curve beneath his mustache. "The little gray cells, Hastings, they thrive on order, on method. Grayson's scheme was clever, but no criminal is infallible. The wax smudge on the dressing table, the hidden candle in the pantry, the scuff mark by the stairs, the burned paper with the word trust. Each was a whisper of his guilt. He believed he could outwit us, but the truth, it always betrays the careless. They stood beside the waiting car, its engine idling softly, the chauffeur a discreet shadow in the driver's seat. The manor loomed behind them, its windows dark, its grandeur muted by the tragedy it had witnessed. Hastings glanced at it, a pang of melancholy in his chest. "Grayson's motive," he said, "it was so cold, killing to protect his power, his pride, and Lady Ashford, all she wanted was to set things right." "Oui," Poirot said, his voice soft but firm. "Lady Ashford sought to mend old wounds, to restore trust with her new will. But trust, once broken, is a dangerous thing. Grayson, with his collusion in the failed investment years ago, could not bear her exposure. The draft will in his briefcase, the argument in the study, these were the sparks that lit his crime. He acted with precision, using the back stairs, the candle, the wire through the keyhole to create an impossible murder." Hastings shook his head, still awed by the mechanics of it. "That wire trick, It's so simple when you explain it, but I'd never have thought of it. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Simplicity, mon ami, is the mark of genius. The lock was old, its keyhole large. A wire, perhaps a hairpin, turned the key from the outside, locking the door after the deed. I tested it myself in the quiet of the night, and the scuff mark, Grayson's shoe, not a cane as I first suspected, confirmed his path from the back stairs to the main corridor. And the candle, Hastings said, hidden so carelessly. Why not destroy it? Haste, Poirot replied, adjusting his gloves. Grayson had moments to act after the murder. He hid the candle behind the pantry panel, intending to retrieve it later. But the butler's vigilance, it was his undoing. The wax smudge, matching the candle's pale yellow hue, was the thread that tied him to the crime. Hastings leaned against the car, his mind tracing the web of deception. The earring, the digitalis, the letter in Clara's prayer book. They were all meant to point us elsewhere, weren't they? Précisément, Poirot said. Grayson was a master of the red herring. The pearl earring stolen from Madame Carver was placed to implicate her. The digitalis vial and letter planted in Mademoiselle Henshaw's room were to frame the heir. But these were clumsy, a sign of his desperation. The locked room, that was his true artistry, but even that could not withstand the scrutiny of Hercule Poirot. The Manor's front door opened, and Mr. Reynolds, the butler, emerged, his face weary but composed. "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings," he said, bowing slightly. "The house is secured. The staff will remain until Mademoiselle Henshaw decides its future. I cannot thank you enough for what you've done." Poirot inclined his head. "Merci, Reynolds. You have served the Manor well. Its wounds will heal in time." Reynolds nodded, a flicker of relief in his eyes. "I hope so, sir. It's been a dark chapter." As the butler retreated, Hastings turned to Poirot. "Clara, what will she do now? She inherits everything, but it's a heavy burden." Poirot's expression grew somber. "Mademoiselle Henshaw is young, but her heart is true. She will carry her aunt's legacy with care, I believe. The Manor, it may stand empty for a time, but it will find new life. As for the others, Madame Carver, Dr. Langley, Mr. Travers, Major Blake, they return to their worlds, their secrets exposed but their consciences lighter." Hastings sighed, his gaze drifting to the downs, their rolling hills cloaked in twilight. "It's a grim lesson, isn't it? Trust, betrayal, murder, all for money and pride." Poirot nodded, his eyes on the stars beginning to pierce the sky. "The human soul, Hastings, is a labyrinth. Trust is its light, but betrayal casts long shadows. Lady Ashford sought to restore trust, but Grayson's pride extinguished her. Yet in her death, we have brought justice, a balance to the chaos." They climbed into the car, the leather seats cool against their backs. As the chauffeur pulled away, the Manor receded, its silhouette blending into the dusk. Hastings glanced at Poirot, whose calm presence was a beacon in the fading light. "You said something earlier about the echoes of the crime lingering. Do they ever fade for you, Poirot?" Poirot's smile was wistful. "They fade, mon ami, but they never vanish. Each case it leaves a mark, a lesson in the frailty of man, the power of truth. But the little gray cells, they are tireless. They seek, they find, they restore order." Hastings leaned back, the car's gentle hum soothing his thoughts. "To London, then? Back to your flat, your books, your routine?" "Oui," Poirot said, his voice brightening. "London with its noise and its mysteries. But rest assured, Hastings, the world will not let Hercule Poirot rest for long. There are always puzzles, always shadows to chase. As the car wound through the darkened lanes, Marwood Manor vanished into the night, its secrets laid bare, its justice served. The case of Lady Ashford's murder was closed, but its echoes of trust betrayed, of truth triumphant, would linger in Poirot's mind, a testament to his genius and the unyielding pursuit of order in a world of chaos.